All right, everyone, we now have a quorum. Let's take our seats, please.
All right.
I guess we need a roll call, Madam Clerk, please.
Yes. Chair Rennie.
Here.
Vice Chair Harney.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, he's there.
Alternate Director Smith.
Here.
Director Saints.
Here.
Director Miller.
Here.
Director Tate.
Here.
Director Bruins.
Here.
I'll note that Directors Corrigan, Cortese, Gibbons, Craig, Abikoga, Griffith are not present, as well as there are no additional alternate directors present.
Okay. And so the first item is public comment on items not on our agenda. Would the public like to make comments? Seeing none, we will move on to our regular calendar. Take it away, Hillary.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate making time twice in 1 week. So this is the fruition of a discussion that we've been having for a little while about the degree of involvement that you guys wanted to have in the legislative process. And so we're going to go through 4 topics today. First of all, I will run you through the legislative environment that we operate in, and also the sort of the network and resources that SVCE has at its disposal to do legislative work. We will have a discussion with you guys, which this is one of the key pieces of the day. We're going to basically lay down the platform for what SVCE wants to achieve through its legislative advocacy. And having these principles decided on by the board will help me and allow me to make decisions on bills when it comes up in situations where we don't have time for full board consultation on a month-by-month basis. So this discussion is the basis of allowing for staff discussion on legislative matters that have short timelines. We'll review some of the current CCA relevant bills that are moving through the legislature, and then finally we'll talk about how we can get you guys involved, how you prefer to be engaged with on issues that you've been fighting. So we've got a quick overview of the agenda. We will morph this around to make sure that we stay on time, but it's basically the order that I just described. So let's get started. So at the highest level, legislative advocacy is basically the most upstream tool that we have at our disposal to ensure an environment where SVCE can continue to exist and fulfill the promises that we make to our ratepayers. So to start off with, when we engage in legislative advocacy, there are kind of 3 main groups of stakeholders that we most often either come into conflict with or can form alliances with. And this is obviously very broad and not comprehensive, but you have the IOUs are most often more or less defenders of the status quo. You have on the environmental stewardship side various grassroots and environmental NGOs that we often overlap with in priorities. You have groups down here in the economic sector, especially for us, organized labor, IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. We don't have so much of a philosophical conflict with them inherently, but since they do a lot of work with the IOUs, they are often allied on that side. And then you have energy companies and independent generators, which actually the changing nature of the energy landscape in California has led to some interesting dynamics on this recently, because solar has become so cheap that there is now sometimes a bit of a schism between solar and wind and other renewable generators, because solar is kind of eating into the market for these other renewables. So for example, we'll touch on 618 a little bit later, CalWIA, the trade organization for wind, actually came out in support of that. So sometimes there are some surprising dynamics, but in general, these are the types of stakeholders that we're working with. So let's look at our elected officials. I know that most of you probably know most of these people. So I'm putting it up here on the assumption that if anyone doesn't know all of them, then it would be useful. So on the assembly side, SVCE's territory is split north-south into 3 different assembly districts. So 24 to the north, we have Mark Berman. District 28 in the middle, we have Evan Lowe. And District 30, Anna Caliero. And the assembly side is definitely a side of focus for us. The strongest legislative supporters of CCAs at the current time have tended to be in the Senate. We fortunately have some very good allies in the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee, but there's been less progress on the Assembly side. So we are very much involved in trying to develop relationships on the Assembly side. Mark Berman, he has had some engagement with CalCCA, the CCA trade organization, and he's a member of the Environmental Legislative Caucus. So we're hoping that we can bring him around to be a strong supporter. Evan Lowe, we are actually meeting with his office later this afternoon, some of you who are in his district. He has a lot of interest on the technology side, which meshes well for us since the nature of our repair base is such that there's a lot of consumer interest in distributed energy technologies, and we're hoping that we can speak to that through the programs that we will be developing in the coming year. So we'll engage with him on that. And Ana Caballero, we actually this was before my tenure at SVCE, but we had a meeting with her that went well at the beginning of the year. So thus far, none of these three officials has had any big concrete tests. None of them are on the Energy and Utilities Committee in the Assembly. They generally won't see things until it goes to a floor vote. So we haven't found out yet definitively where they fall, but as of now, most bills are still in committee, so there's time. And then on the Senate side, again, we have the same north-south split district-wise. Jerry Hill is one of the strongest supporters of CCAs in the entire Senate. We're very lucky to have him. He represents, his district has parts of SVCE and also Peninsula Clean Energy, which is our neighboring CCA to the north. He sits on both the Energy, Utilities, and Communications and the Environmental Quality Committees, which oftentimes energy-related bills that pertain to us will go through both of those committees before they go to appropriations. And so we're fortunate that he's been a strong ally, but we want to make sure that we don't take that for granted and stay engaged with him. District 15, we have Jim Bell. He has been focusing a lot on transportation, has not had extensive involvement in energy issues, but we want to make sure that if there are places where those interests overlap, his current transportation bill is kind of hard on electric vehicles, so that intersection, unfortunately, might be going in the other direction, but we'll work on that. And then you have Bill Lonning down in District 17, the current Senate Majority Leader. Again, he will be dealing more with these bills when they get to the floor. So we have 6 elected officials, and then there are some other important players in our constellation up in Sacramento. So CalCCA is the newly formed California Trade Association for Community Choice Aggregators, and we use that organization to share knowledge and resources on a variety of fronts, but one of the most important reasons for forming it is so that we could present a united front in Sacramento and pull together a good high-powered lobbying team. So CalCCA employs 2 lobbyists. We have Emily Pappas with Mel Pappas and Associates, and Don Gilbert with Elson Gilbert, Robson, and Smith. These guys, we're very fortunate to have them. They're basically the 2 most knowledgeable people in this community in Sacramento at the time on CCA issues, because both of them, before they began working for CalCCA, they worked for individual CCAs. So Emily worked with Clean Energy for 6 years, and Don has been with SFPUC, which includes Clean Power SF, their CCA, for 15. So we are fortunate to be able to get them to work on the CalCCA front, because now their history of knowledge and networking around CCA issues for these individual organizations can be put to use for all of us. So, and this allows us to tap into a network that, as a younger organization, we would need much more time to build up to. So, let's talk a little bit about how SVCE's efforts dovetail with CalCCA. CalCCA has a protocol for dealing with legislative issues, and it kind of works in a loop from Sacramento to us and then back to Sacramento. So it kind of starts with the lobbyists. Unlike regulatory proceedings, where you can sort of sign up for a distribution list and get all the information that you need in writing, we need the lobbyists for a lot of information about progress on who's supporting a bill, who's against it, how negotiations are going. So the lobbyists identify key bills and monitor their progress, give us intel on negotiations around them. Then CalCCA has a legislative subcommittee that is made up of staff representatives from each CCA. So I am our representative on the legislative subcommittee. We go through the bills, analyze the language, look at the potential implications for CCA operation, and we come to a recommendation that we send to the Cal CCA board, which is made up of the CEOs of all of the members. Tom is our representative on the Cal CCA board. And then they approve, and at that point, once we have a decided upon position, the lobbyists can work on things in Sacramento. Also, all of us individual members go back and work on building advocacy in our own districts. So that's where you guys come in. That's where, if we can build alliances with other community organizations, we basically try and build up support for the position that we have decided on. And then some general thoughts on advocacy through Cal CCA, and this really speaks for CCA legislative advocacy in general. For us, SVCE, in the vast majority of situations, it's going to behoove us to go along with Cal CCA because the CCA model is structured to be flexible and adaptable to local priorities and interests. But the nature of the legislative threats that we often face is such that the differences between individual CCAs don't make those threats any more or less relevant. So, for example, two of the legislative threats that we most often face, and as you can tell, we are often playing defense. You guys know that. We're new, we're shaking things up. So two of the threats that we most often face are the creation of new non-bypassable charges, new ways for the investor utilities to charge costs to our ratepayers, or increases in regulatory oversight that could potentially threaten our local autonomy and right to do our own procurement. And for those, it doesn't matter whether you're focused on carbon-free energy, whether you're focused on affordable rates, on building local capacity, those threats will impact your ability to fulfill those missions all the same. So in terms of on the legislative front, oftentimes it makes sense for the CCAs to work together. In Sacramento, generally, what we are trying to do is strike a balance between neutralizing immediate threats and building up our long-term position in Sacramento. We are a relative newcomer, so we need to make sure that some threats are very unambiguous and immediate, and you have to just throw everything at them that you can. At the same time, if you have a bill that is potentially less of a threat and you risk alienating a key supporter or something like that, we do try and be cognizant of building long-term relationships with supporting legislators. So it's a balance, and we are walking the knife edge as best we can. And then finally, the one thing to keep in mind, and this is part of what makes today's discussion so important, is that we're a small enough player in Sacramento that we still often have to deal with sort of deus ex machina situations in which you analyze a bill, you make a plan, you sort of do your negotiations, and then something happens that has nothing to do with any of that, may not have anything to do even with the entire energy stakeholders community, something to do with somebody's re-election or Senate etiquette or trading votes because somebody's trying to build support for another bill. And so sometimes circumstances change very quickly, and there's very little we can do to get back into the original situation because we're just a small player at this point. So that's part of the reason why this discussion today is so important, is because in those situations, as staff, we sometimes have to make quick decisions about how do we feel about these amendments, where do we want to go from here, and knowing your guys' preference is important for that. So,
do you have a list of threats that we should always be aware of, so if the opportunity comes up or arises with some of these influencers, we can say, hey, here's something's top of mind that we're keeping aware of. I mean, you mentioned a couple of them about creation of new non-passable fees, and you talked about regulatory changes that prevent us from buying our own power. But is there a list of things that we should know as board of directors what those threats are? And for me, we should know.
That's a good point. It's not written down, but we can work on that if you'd like, because there are some things that show up as repeating patterns. I mean, those are two of them. Oftentimes, there's sort of a whole spectrum of terms that can be in a piece of legislation that determine the jurisdiction of that. So, for example, if it applies to electrical corporations, that's the investor-owned utilities. If it applies to load-serving entities, that's them plus us. oftentimes what you'll see in a bill is they'll say, here's the sort of language for the load serving entities, here's the language for the local publicly owned utilities, which is municipal utilities. And oftentimes what we'll try and do is get ourselves grouped more in with the municipal utilities, because they also have more autonomy. So we try and, so sometimes very small pieces of the language can make a big difference in terms of whether the bill applies to us as a threat or is maybe totally irrelevant. That's something that we don't even need to advocate on.
Yeah, I just
Also in the afternoon we have some discussion about some of the legislation that are out there today and what kind of issues that we have with some of them. So we'll be able to share that with you. Obviously, those things happen continuously, and we should be able to, through the legislative and regulatory update that we give you monthly, be able to share some of the issues and some of the threats that we're facing every time we go and talk to the CPUC or the legislators. So.
I just remember when we went to Salinas to meet with Ana Caldero, it was like an elevator pitch. We had 3 minutes to tell her what our concerns were, what was threatening us, and I didn't have a cheat sheet. I had a cheat sheet. I mean, you were there, so you were my cheat sheet. And Steve was there. But these situations are going to come up more frequently than not, I think, where we can explain to them, here's what we're working on, here's what we got to be aware of, and here's how you can support us.
Well, we can put that together if that would be useful to you. I think another good thing that we could put on there is common misconceptions, because that's something that definitely, especially on the legislative side, we have to deal with, is that in the absence of knowledge about what CCAs are, people can get explanations from the IOUs or from other, basically, CCA opposition that is sometimes a poor representation of what we do.
Thank you.
So yes, that's a good idea. Thank you. Before we move on, does anybody have questions about this section, about who we work with, about how we relate to CCA on this, anything like that? All right. Moving on. Okay. So let's move into the discussion piece. So the goal of this is to basically have a conversation that allows me and those I work with to convey accurately SVCE's interest in our legislative conversations, and have the ability of a discussion to make decisions about our position on bills or our need to or not to follow the bill in such a way that doesn't require you guys to actively engage on every bill, because that's time-consuming and difficult, and I know you guys have a lot of things on your plate. But I want to make sure that we're doing that in a way that is consistent with what you guys feel is important as a board. So there are basically 2 questions that we need to know how we're going to answer. And that is what do we want to accomplish with our legislative advocacy? What are the principles that you guys feel are really important that will determine how we identify bills that are threatening? And then what kind of gate or filter do we apply when we're deciding, do we want to engage at all? Because there are hundreds of bills out there, and we have to basically prioritize our resources. So before we do that, I pulled a couple statements from our strategic plan that we talked about on Wednesday that is newly released. So some of the things that come up in terms of priorities, we see basically the 2 themes here are GHG mitigation. Sorry, I'm just getting over a cold. GHG mitigation and climate stewardship, and then also maintenance of the CCA as a viable institution so that we can continue functioning and serve our customers. So this is the part where I'd like to hear from you guys. What do you think is important in terms of the key priorities that we need to be focusing on in the legislative sphere? Do you have thoughts on how we should structure our advocacy in terms of prioritizing different types of bills? Let's get started. So I have some examples here of the types of statements that we're looking for, basically key principles that I can work off as a representative of you guys.
First question is, how broad do we want to get? Is it important for us to save our power for things that are really important? Or maybe I'll reverse the question, is it bad if we're commenting on everything? And then and maybe we're not listening to when we really want to. An example would be maybe you wanted to go comment on AB1 saying, we don't think you should be charging electric vehicles. That's related but getting far from our mission, for example. That would seem to me like it's using overpower where it's not needed. Do you have any thought on that?
Definitely. There are broadly speaking two categories here. There are the category that will specifically harm CCA structurally, and then bills kind of like what you're talking about that are reshaping the energy landscape more broadly in a way that we do interact with, but is not aimed directly at us. And to answer your question, I would say it does matter, definitely. We are still developing as a stakeholder in Sacramento, and I think that the nature of some of the threats that we face means that sometimes our supporters have to stand up to some of their seniors. It basically it's not always the easiest position to support. Fortunately, like on the State Environment and Utilities Committee with 618 Bradford, that was a bill that there was a lot of support for, broadly speaking, but our three allies of that committee were willing to speak up. But it is true that conserving powder is generally a good thing. I think we should play our cards carefully.
Isn't there sort of multiple levels, more nuance? Like if it's something subtle, maybe we send a letter in, that sits in the pile, but if it's something that's really important, you're going for FaceTime, or our management team's going for FaceTime, and us electeds are going for FaceTime. So it's saving the big powder, but then there's little things that may not matter as much.
Well, this brings up a good point about there is a break point between us and CalCCA, for example, where if CalCCA takes a position on a bill, we could go along with that and have the lobbyists working on it, but choose not to, for example, like you said, have you guys actively seeking out FaceTime. There's a sort of a break there where some things we could leave to CalCCA and not put so much of you guys' time and capital into it. Whereas there are some things that we will definitely want to be actively engaging everyone that we can on. So that's a good point. We can choose to stay out of the fight and not take a position, or we can take a position and kind of modulate our level of aggressiveness in putting that forth.
And I'm hopeful, and I don't know where everybody else stands, but I'm hopeful that it's a rare situation where it's the full court press, where we're all calling Evan and Jerry and others. That would be like the real rare thing. Most of the time it would be you working with CCA and saying, yeah, we're generally in favor of what you're doing. Good luck.
That is how it's played out so far. We oftentimes things can. It is rare that it comes down like it did for 618 to sort of a full-on grassroots fight on all sides. Oftentimes we can we can do basically what you just described. Once we have a position, it can be worked out in Sacramento without doing a ton of outside advocacy. So that's the general goal that I would like to aim for. Yes.
And then just in terms of positions, if I may, it's like, are we going to take a position on everything, or are we going to take positions like 10%? Or how do you see us?
I would say less than 10%. Did you have
I was just going to say it's often that if we get 100 bills that are related to energy, our position will be watched on maybe 95 of them, and only on very few that we're going to be either opposed or support. Most likely oppose until amended, then eventually support. That's I think pretty much how it's been working for years now. You just look at all the bills out there. There will be quite a few that are just going to say, I'm just going to sit back and watch a little bit, see how it progresses. And as soon as you see something in it that takes something that would do something that would be harmful or helpful, then you start taking positions.
Isn't this where our priority advocacy list comes in?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we say, we want to ensure that any bill that has an impact to our autonomy to procure, that comes up, we are going to take a very strong position on that, because that's a priority one type of.
Also, a lot of times, our lobbyists have a keen eye of what's likely to move and what is likely to die. And so even though they may see something in there, that a bill that's harmful, they will tell you, don't spend too much time on it because this is pretty much going to be and more often than not, it does. There will be some, obviously, the lobbyists will tell you, you better do something, a phone call press to make sure that this thing doesn't come back to haunt us. And those are the ones that we're going to be focusing most of our time on.
So essentially, we sort of need like a decision matrix to help guide the board and guide the staff on which legislative bills are important to us or what themes are important to us. Is that right? Is that what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly.
What about beyond the bills? Are we going to do anything? There may not be a current legislative bill or something going on, but there may be something that we think should be happening in the future. For example, you hear it from me all the time, the state should find a way to incentivize storage. So are we going to advocate for bills that have not yet been written to be written? Are we going to take a position in those spaces?
I actually have a slide on that. But
Okay, then don't let me distract you.
well, let's let me loop back to that. I will address that today. All right, Nancy?
Yeah, so Sunnyvale each year comes up with, the council approves legislative advocacy positions to give staff the room to allocate resources. And we have a specific thing called out this year for renewable energy and community choice agriculture. So I feel that comfortable with the board moving forward to doing something similar with Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Ours specifically, Sunnyvale specifically calls out clean energy related issues, including energy conservation, renewable energy, energy storage, distributed energy, and community choice aggregation. I think that it would be helpful to call out some of the other areas that you mentioned, like cost and procurement, which I don't see listed here. So,
In our platform, you're saying?
yeah, in your platform. And frankly, they should be ours too, but.
It's definitely pertinent to us.
So is what you're envisioning something like this, like a legislative policy position that would give the staff?
Yes. For example, there are other CCAs that have something exactly like this, basically a one-pager that just lays out, these are the things that we care about. Actually, I have a slide on that too tonight. But that's what I'm hoping to come up with here is, I put together a little document based on the conversation today that will be basically just our platform that I can distribute to you guys at the next board meeting so that you'll have it. And that would be my sort of backstop reference for when we're making policy decisions.
So could I further suggest that we also include in the platform broader topics like cap and trade, greenhouse gas emissions, goals, and things affecting the broader, environment? Is that, I don't know if other people would be comfortable with that, but I think it would be something to consider. It's a little bit out of scope per se, but I think it would be impactful.
This is something that, this also brings up a good point that we can watch issues like that. We can include that on the list and watch bills and then basically decide, like Tom was saying earlier, whether getting involved, whether sometimes they will be fine without us, whether we have the resources. But we can cast that net in terms of what we watch and decide whether there's a place that we can make a difference on those. Because that does play into our mitigation mission in general. But, Rod, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I was interested in maybe starting with strategic discussion. So, if the world evolves as we'd like it to in the next 5 years, given regulatory things, given all the CCs forming out, probably at some lean energy call or something, but got a map of all the activity that's going on, not only on the coast, but interior of California and the red counties. And it occurred to me, right, as some have said, that it may just be that the IOUs are just going to get out of the energy supply business. I don't know if that belief is widely held or what you think, but let's say, what sort of world what sort of energy future do we think would be ideal for California in 5 years? And what would we do if we were being strategic about this? One area that Howard's chirped on many times, the rest of us have, is, we think there's a train wreck coming on the current RPS because we don't seem to be able to build. We're almost saturated on solar until we start growing demand through electrification of transportation, storage, or modification of that formula would be important. So in the bigger picture, right? What do we think is going to happen, or what do we think would be cause to happen? Are the IOUs inevitably going to keep supplying energy for 5 years? If not, right, what sort of things ought we be plotting to try to bring about that the desired outcome? I'm not sure I have all the answers, but at least I think we ought to be framing all this, which to me is a little more tactical in terms of where we think the world is going, or where we might like it to go.
There are a couple of legislation that are on the books today, and we're going to be talking about it in the afternoon, that seem to be going where we always wanted to go, which is bringing more renewables online. But eventually, if they do happen without dealing with storage or something, it can affect the operation.
Solar, right?
Yeah, exactly. It can bring a lot of solar in, but it's not calling for enough storage to be able to balance the picture and make the operation of the grid work appropriately. And we may have to, right now we have a watchful, we're just watching these legislation, but we may have to take sometimes contradictory or at least positions that don't seem to be in line with what we've always been talking about, just to make sure that operationally the grid doesn't get into a crisis mode in a year or two. And I think we need to be talking about that in the afternoon and get your input as to what positions do we need to take. So far, just about any position that you can see is we're just watching. We're taking a watchful position, but we may have to become a little bit more active into trying to formulate some of those legislation in order to make sure that the future is working for us.
Yes, overall, I hope we're not just worried about our existential, our existence, right? But we're actually maybe helping bring California to a better place. And not just hiring us, but all of us, right? It's like, we're not just in this to
That's why
we're the incumbent. We're actually in this to mitigate climate change, provide affordable rates, let's play fair, right?
Make sure that the grid is working reliably. And I think that's what you see in our mission, and that our mission is reflected here in what Henry put together. Is that one, with climate mitigation, green, carbon-free, at the lowest cost, while minding the reliability of the system or the grid. And these are the overarching goals that we have.
I might add that the debate has always been framed around the IOUs coming into the CPUC telling them that they need to raise rates because their costs are going up. What if we got some concepts out on the table that say, we think you ought to reframe this regulatory world and say, in IOU territories, we can go out on the offensive and say we think that IOUs ought to be allowed to charge a certain rate of return above the average of municipal utilities in your area.
On energy.
Plus a fair rate of return No, on everything that they do, plus a fair rate of return, and that's it. So how would we get them on a slim down bioscope?
Well, I think so. A couple things about this. I would say at this stage, well, so first you were talking about broader strategy, and I think I very much agree with you that we should be not narrow-minded in this and focusing on only CCA autonomy. I would caution at this stage against us investing heavily in legislative fights that don't affect CCAs at all, really, and are more broad landscaping just because our resources are constrained. But that said, I think what you were talking about, one way that we can further that is in how we approach bills that do affect CCAs. We very seldom take a position of just straight up oppose. Often what we'll say is oppose unless amended. And what we try to do there is get amendments in that preserve the original intent of the bill, if the intent is a landscaping piece, but does so in a way that incorporates CCAs in a way that's more accommodating of our needs. So we will very seldom try to just destroy a bill, especially if it's doing something for sort of broader energy reshaping the landscape that is going to be good 5 or 10 years down the road. So oftentimes we try and sort of be surgical about it and say, we appreciate the overall approach here, but we would prefer it if you treat us this way instead, in terms of like, oftentimes it's give our board more authority instead of the CPUC, something like that. So I would caution against us doing full court press on bills that don't address CCAs at all. If it's broader landscaping, just because we are a somewhat small stakeholder, but we can further that mission in how we treat bills that pertain to us, because we can try and keep the intent intact while improving the way they treat CCAs.
So I'm more in Nancy's camp. I think we ought to be talking about climate change and advocating for the right thing. And it may be, right, that with our little Cal CCA and the specific resources we're applying, we're pretty narrow. But I think our strategic plan says we're going to help California. We are going to do our part, and then some to help California meet its goals in 2020 and 2030 and so forth. And this is how much we can do directly. This is how much we can do with incentives, carrots that we put out, right? In terms of, helping electrify transportation. But, the truth is, right, all of us are in cities that have climate action plans. Some of us serve on the airport, where we are interacting with CARB all the time about some of this stuff. So if we have a strategic framework that we're working from, it seems to me like there ought to be broad room for how do we fix the grid as well, right? What do we do to ensure a robust grid, but we're not paying too much for it? What do we do about storage? What do we do about fixing the RPS so that it's not just this, more solar thing? And it may be, that Cal CCA's interests are a little narrower and we focus on things directly related to CCAs, but I think as people in local government that are advocating to fix climate, that we ought to have a broader strategy in mind that is actually moving us forward as a state, where CCAs are playing a role rather than, it's all about CCA.
I get the strategy thing, but I got to point out, it seems obvious to me, probably everybody here. I worry that we are one vote away. It's not really one vote, but one bad bill or one bad CPUC decision that shifts a whole bunch of costs our direction, which just destroys all of CCA's economics.
Mm-hmm.
And so, while I get the strategy thing, I think if we have to spend our immediate tactical resources, we have to protect ourselves from the whole cost shift jump that's going on and protect our ability to procure. So if there's like Maslow's hierarchy or whatever, I agree with some of the higher parts of the pyramid that you're bringing up, but I think there's some very base things on the bottom that if we don't have a good handle on, the game's over anyway.
So you would agree that we can have a long-term strategy, but we devote current dollars toward.
Well, I'm 100% with you on that. I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
My comment is, well, I agree with this, the whole strategy approach and the direction. I think there's some really fundamental things at the bottom that would just totally undermine us if they went the wrong way. And that's what we should focus, at least to start.
Fair enough.
I totally agree with that. I think, using the term surgical, I think we need to have a laser precision. And while, yes, I understand the broader elements of our climate and such, but we're all elected. We sit in our cities. We can fight some of those battles from that chair. But when we're in here, it is the health of this organization and the ability to deliver on the very specific charter and mission of this organization. So again, if we want to do something more passive and supporting something, and if our cities are taking a position on something, and we would like to ask this body to just write a letter of support, period, end of discussion, that's one thing. But to use our resources, if it doesn't deal with the lifeline of this organization, right now, it's still too new. I want our energy focused on what keeps us alive and performing and delivering our promise.
And what could kill us, truly.
Yeah.
I agree with that approach because I think that, independently, each of these CCAs are just a small cog of this really large wheel, right? But collectively, all of these CCAs are as we know, is disrupting the industry. People are going to get stop. To put it quite frankly. And that's, I think, what we need to be cognizant of and to be fighting for. That we continue to operate our business as an independent business that is supported and can be that positive disruption. So I agree exactly with what we're saying, that it's got to be some higher level mission, long-term statements and direction that guides our principles. But right now, I look at it as our focus, we need to be laser focused on survival over the next 3 years.
Actually, I really like the pyramid analogy because I see the theme that I'm seeing here is that we should put a time element in this statement. And I think that's really good because we will not always be as small as we are now. We've got Los Angeles, San Diego, 3 Southern California counties working together on forming CCAs. San Jose, in a few years, this might be a really different presentation, especially depending on what happens with the IOUs and their business model. So we could actually, we could structure this with kind of a list of things that we will focus on like the next year or 2, and things that we want to keep an eye on, and basically monitor our resources and our standing and start engaging on those as we go. So up here, we put things that we work on immediately, like what you're saying, bills that will immediately kill our ability to
It goes with Maslow's theory is your base needs on the bottom, like food, air, and water are on the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that the pyramid should be inverse. All of our priorities.
Things that hold up the pyramid, it's not the floor.
Flip it upside down. It's not upside down.
That's true. Actually, I might need to draw it here. But yeah, I think this is really good because also we will have to do work on here. So yeah, we want to instead do this.
There you go.
And our time axis runs this way. This is present.
Oh, you could dream that it would be linear with time.
What's up?
Power.
Okay, pull your head.
I expect there to be an ongoing set of battles from the major providers on this whole cost shift thing. And they may try one approach and lose, and another approach next year, and another approach the year after. You know, it's like every year we're going to have to plant and sow wheat, right? If we get what we start. And every year we're going to have to fend these guys off from trying to shift all these costs to us that would destroy our economics. So I don't think, you know, it's like, oh, this year that's our focus. It's like somehow that's one of the base focuses forever is to defend that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that we will never, the stuff that goes down here now about sort of defending the integrity of our business model, defending our ability to stay below PGB rates through avoiding rates, that definitely is here to stay. It's more of what can we add to that as we go along. And since this has come up a couple times, let me skip ahead because I have a slide on originating legislative solutions that let's talk about this now because this is definitely something that is at our disposal, but I think it's something that we want to think carefully about. Because so we can start legislation, we can come up with some language, we have good legal resources at SVCE that can help us do that if we want to. We would need to find a legislative sponsor. But there are some somewhat serious things that we should think about before we take this on. Both on our side and in terms of the characteristics of the environment. Because on our side, right now, we've been taking a pretty reactive approach, right? We look at what bills are out there, we decide to support or oppose and whatnot. And one good thing about that is it allows us to be pretty flexible with our resources because we are not sort of the first point of responsibility for any of these bills. So if we're working on something and then halfway through the session it gets amended and it's no longer a problem, but another bill over here got gutted and changed into something more threatening, we can change our focus. But if we are originating a bill, that's going to be a pretty big resource commitment that we're going to need to stick with through the whole session because if it doesn't get through and get passed in a form that's useful to us, then it's the whole thing is for nothing. So it can be very useful, but it also reduces our flexibility to respond to other threats. So if something else comes up, we may find ourselves in a position where we're a little bit more tied up than we would be otherwise. That said, talking about cost shifts, so this one place where we may want to take on the commitment of originating legislation is to resolve situations that have become intractable on the regulatory side. Normally, the regulatory side is somewhat more closed off to advocacy. So this is kind of like the big move that you can take to change the baseline of the conversation. But I think, and this is something that with PAM, with the replacements to the PCI, is being talked about on both sides. We could potentially introduce something, the IOUs could also introduce something. And I think the key thing to think about when you're deciding to try and do a legislative solution to a regulatory issue is you want to look at the characteristics of those two environments and make sure that you're confident that you have a better chance of success moving into the legislative sphere than in regulatory. Because in regulatory, for example, it's a smaller community. People are generally, we don't have to fight the basic education fight. People know who we are. But on the other hand, it's a smaller number of decision makers. So if they come to a stance, if they arrive at a stance that is unfair to us, that can be difficult to change and have a long-term impact. Whereas on the legislative side, it's a much bigger world. You can sort of start over, but we're also a smaller fish in a bigger pond there. So if we start that fight, we also need to acknowledge there's a chance there that if we start that fight, it may get out of our hands. We may end up against stakeholders that have much deeper pockets than us and bigger resources. So I think it's definitely a tool that we have. I think especially with a new organization, it's something we should consider carefully before using because it can be somewhat uncontrollable. So, but it's there. And definitely as we get to sort of, especially, it's useful in two ways. It's useful here for sort of emergency solutions, which we might end up doing on PAM. And then it's useful once we get up here, as we have more resources, and if we want to start doing kind of broader landscape shifting things.
But I think the key actually to be successful here is to look for partners. Depending on what we're going after, there's got to be
very true. That's very true. And depending on where the IOUs go, that's if we could sort of get a coalition against, we are not the only ones that often have arguments with them. So realistically, if we were going to do this, we would probably try and map out long before the bill is introduced who would be supporting it, who our networks would be. But I agree with you. That's definitely a piece there that can make this easier.
I'm thinking more broadly. If we went after, I agree with Rod's point of the RPS train wreck that's coming. I think there's a lot of people that are going to have a stake in wanting to find solutions to that we could partner with if we wanted to try to drive that. And I see the RPS train wreck as something that threatens our survival because of the potential cost. The duck curve creates cost risk to us and so forth. So I think that's important to think about.
Well, this is worth noting too that, and this is an option that's always on the table, and this is something. While I will be taking positions on our behalf, sort of without consulting you guys on everyone, this is a much bigger deal, and you guys will know and have more involvement in this if this is something we're considering, because that's a much bigger project than just taking a stance. So, but okay, so how do we feel about creating a statement that is basically kind of a two-part statement, where we talk about immediate, I'm hearing that the categories are basically immediate threats to our operation, and also wanting to pay attention to the shaping of the landscape over the next 5, 10, 20 years, and accommodating that as we get stronger and have the resources to do so. So we have things here like procurement autonomy. I'm thinking, what do you think of this? If this was one you guys played, but I assume you signed up for that, so. Avoiding NBCs, possible charges that are not necessary. And then the other
That just assumed that you accept the current methodology.
the current methodology of
Well, you're just focusing on the non-bypassable charges, but I feel like we're subsidizing PG&E shareholders for former mistakes that PG&E made because of existing contracts they might agree. So that's a little bit more assertive than just avoiding these.
this is also is a catch-all term that can be something other than PCI income. But what should we replace it with?
Well, avoiding's okay, but I think, there's a change there too. I don't know how you say it. But yeah, we do want to avoid them, but I think there's something else in that space too. They're constantly pushing they should charge us more. We should somehow be constantly asserting we're overcharged and we're covering up for their business mistakes. How do you use that in terms of
Just because on that point, I think we ought to be getting by saying municipal utilities aren't charging anything like what these guys are doing. So why is that?
They're not
If
sure.
you're paying $11 million salaries to CEOs and lots of money to executives, and you're turning to shareholders, why is it that these folks are being allowed to have the rate of return? Not only the rate of return, but the cost base that they have. I mean, it's absurd.
Yes.
And we ought to be making that a proactive argument is to say, it's awful easy to adopt their whole thing, right?
Yeah, that's why
Their whole thing is our costs are what they are, we're so sorry, but that's how it is, and well, they're not apologetic about it. Our costs are what they are, there's nothing to do about it.
Except for pay us.
And therefore, everybody ought to pay for our costs. It's like, wait a minute. Shouldn't we challenge that?
This
I
is
think
one of the things
we make that point more often than not, and we come back with the same answer each and every time. Well, you made us do it, and you meaning the CPUC. So you, CPUC, along with the legislators, came up with a bunch of bills, and the CPUC implemented those bills in a way that forced us to go out and buy all these non-competitive, not very good resources in order to make sure that the customer will get the energy that they need. You made me do it. Then somebody else should be paying for it.
How is it, dear Mr. Legislator, how is it, if you look at this in some perspective, a different perspective, how is it that the CPUC has been captured by the utilities over 100 years, such that today they're charging 30% more for the same service than municipal utilities? And why can't we have that conversation?
We can and we should.
And why ought we simply put up with this mediocrity? We are disruptors. We are the ones that are saying, no, there's a different way to skin this cat. And, dear PG&E, how is it that you're allowed to put on copious amounts of stock advertising on television, expensive advertising? Who's paying for that? It's not your shareholders. How is it that you're allowed, as a regulated monopoly, to charge the kind of prices you do and pay the salaries you do? Maybe it's time for you to skinny down by 40%.
Well, I think that I agree with you on that. I think that one thing that is happening, it may be that happens a little bit without us needing to say it even so much, in that CCAs are coming to represent more and more of the demand. There's an en banc on the 19th talking about the future of retail choice in California. I think that at this current time, especially given the atmosphere of CPUC, it is a little difficult for us to sort of say we need to fix the entire thing at once. But I think that when we engage with them on sort of like, so what you talked about challenging the fundamental principle that we need to pay their costs, that is something that is part of the strategy we're developing for PAM. This is a key time to challenge that. And I think there are pieces like that where we can pick out strategically the big sort of fundamental realignment of the IOU's level of influence that you're talking about. I think part of the reason that we're having this fight with PAM, and I'm not trying to focus too much on that because it's regulatory, but it's important to the general landscape, is that this broader realignment that you're talking about, I think, is happening systemically as CCAs come online, and so when we work on specific things, that's contributing to that effort in the long term. I think that it's difficult to take that position now and realign everything instantly, because we're fighting a bit of a defensive fight as it is. But we can do that piece by piece, and that's what we're trying to do.
And the more of us that come online and providing greener energy at lower cost, the more you shine the light on.
We're showing them up.
Yeah.
And the fact is, the municipal utilities have been showing them up for decades.
Exactly.
And I'm not convinced that playing a purely defensive strategy, even in the short term, is the right answer here. Because I think they are going to foist all their expensive costs on it. They are going to figure out how, if they lose, electricity, they're going to figure out how to foist more and more on the grid. And I don't accept that they have if they were forced to do it, they went to the CPUC asking for more and more and more and more, and they captured the CPUC, and the CPUC gave it to them. And the CPUC is obviously also complicit, but we ought to be, with all the folks, including the folks in Sacramento, we ought to be having a conversation that, maybe there's a different line to take. And my best, I think it's really hard out of the context of no competition to talk about, what's fair. But to me, what's fair is taking a look at what meetings have. Really understanding that they provided more value over time. Now we're able to do about half of what meetings can do because we're dealing with energy supply. But there's something really wrong with just accepting that the IOU's costs are just what they are and they're unchallengeable.
And another way to say it is PG&E, we need to look for changes that forces them to compete. Right now, we've come in and theoretically we're a competitor. When I go out and talk to my constituents, that's what I say. Hey, we are now bringing competition to the marketplace, but the CPUC has really still prevented them from needing to compete by just shifting all the charges to us. They have no consequence for buying expensive contracts. Are they still out there buying expensive contracts? I'm assuming they don't need to buy anything, but maybe they are. We need to change it in a way that forces them to compete, because it will be good for everybody that may be that.
What's in it for them if their energy costs go up 5 or 10%? They just pass through, right? What's their incentive to be efficient right now?
Well, then it's first, because when they start marketing and when they start trying to compete directly with us by demonstrating that they can provide just as clean energy for less than we are doing, and the reason they can do it's kind of like operating on CCA within PG&E. Then what they are doing, they're not going to be loading their clean energy. If I'm a PG&E customer, I go to their clean energy option. I bet you I am not paying that same PCI as the other clean energy. They're pulling their own people out of their pool, but they're not.
See, that's even more dangerous if they're then able to look like they're competing, but are being protected.
They're being protected. They're going to act like one, except they're going to protect themselves, and they have that whole marketing capability to go back after and start picking off, trying to show our customers because we're not able. If you start long term, they're building the equivalent of a CCA and inside of them through their marketing power, and they're not putting those same costs on those customers as they're putting on us as being independent of CCA. If you look at that, I just sit there saying, I think
There's certainly a risk.
I think they're risking. They're going to have the marketing dollars to go and pick our customers off. We will not have marketing dollars to go and pick our customers
We
back.
got this discussion going. I don't know if it's measurable or if there's public data, but it sure feels to me like their soft marketing has gotten to be huge. Whether it's Sunday morning talk shows or advertising that they're doing, it feels to me like they must be spending a lot more on it. It's on goodwill advertising. It doesn't create any value except for the brand.
I think this is really something to watch. If they come out with here's 100% carbon free for you at a price less than ours, they've they've got all of their renewable contracts are expensive. So how would they be able to give it less than us unless they've cost shifted somewhere? So that's what we have to watch out
Because
for.
we're paying for all the crap that they bought before. They're not charging that to their own customers. That's how we're going to be doing it. To me, it's pretty black and white how they're going to do it. That's all I do.
That's where we make sure
Especially in our lack of
Because the transparency is shut.
right? It's all done behind closed doors.
This is a really good conversation. I want to shift gears a little bit because I think one of the things we should also focus on is, I've heard and I've read that PG&E wants to get out of energy production, right? And what if they do? For us, if one of our mission statements is to have a reliable distribution network, and that's not in our control, right? That is only in PG&E's control. How do we manage the cost of maintaining that infrastructure? And I think that needs to be up there somewhere fairly high, right? Because that goes into the PCI and the delivery and all that stuff. Sure. So I guess what I'm saying is, if PG&E says, hey, you know what? We are totally getting out of energy production, and we're only going to provide renewable energy types or carbon-free energy types. What does that mean to us from a pricing standpoint of acquiring the power for our clients? Number one. Number two, more importantly, what does that do to the maintenance of the infrastructure that's there to deliver a reliable service? And so there's three components to this conversation, right? It's IOUs, it's reliability of the infrastructure, and it's fair competition amongst the CCAs and the big players.
So you're saying that we should be involved in watching, even though our customers pay the same delivery fees as PG&E's bottle customers, we should be watching what they're doing to the delivery costs and the grid infrastructure maintenance, such that that's not becoming bloated.
And yeah, and what happens if we deregulate the infrastructure? If we say, okay, well now the munis are going to be responsible for managing the grids where they are. What does that mean to us? That makes sense.
They either are in the distribution business or they're not, right? They own all this stuff, so presumably
They're required by law.
every bit of interest is theirs to ensure that they're compensated fairly through rates for the grid. Maybe not so much the electricity supply, right?
But if there's a deregulation of them owning the grid, I think that's something we should be watching and be cognizant of it and figure out what does that mean to us.
I think that when it comes to the distribution system and the transmission system, it's highly unlikely. I would say really impossible for that to be deregulated because you're not going to duplicate the lines in every city. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to get approval. Nobody's going to get approval to be able to duplicate building another set of poles, for example, in order to provide a system. So that is probably not one of our concerns. The main concern that we have is how can we get the point, at least out of today's discussion, how do we get the point to our legislators that they need to be watchful because at one point or another we're going to come to them needing their help to either push for legislation or to resist a push for a legislation coming in that will eventually harm us. That's what we want to get out of today, and I think making the point to the legislators that there's a cozy relationship between the three investment-owned utilities and those who are regulating them, the CPUC more specifically, and they need to watch out for it, and they need to be aware that relationship can be harmful to our existence is kind of the message that we need to be able to continuously deliver to our assemblymen and our senators, because invariably, every 5 to 10 years, we will be on the offensive. In between, we'll be always on the defensive, but every few years, we'll be on the offensive, seeking legislation to do one thing or another that will keep us in business and keep us thriving, not just surviving. And we've seen that in 2002, we've seen it again in 2010, where the CCAs went on the offensive and went out and sought legislation that eventually helped them come to existence. I don't doubt it for 1 second that we're going to have to do the same thing again. If not next year, or maybe the year after, where we're going to go out and seek legislation that will deal with the spam issue that's coming at us.
I think we're going to get a lot of support if we demonstrate that we are the most efficient way to provide clean, greenhouse gas-free electricity. We're organized better, we got a lower cost basis for all the right reasons, and we're the ones that are going to make, we are going to solve this greenhouse gas problem as regards to electricity. I think we've got to make that case. We've got to make the case that the current system is inefficient. That's what we're taking advantage of. That's a good thing. It's a disruptive thing. And our permanent value in this ecosystem, as long as we have it, right, is that we're doing this more efficiently than the combination of the CPUC and the IAUs.
So that's another thing that should be on there. Things that affect our efficiency, right, or add cost to. It's not the cost shifting, but cause us to create a bureaucracy. We want to within ourselves, because there are some bills already that we're trying to do that.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm sorry, go ahead.
That seems more almost like a marketing function in some way.
To demonstrate.
Legislative one.
And keep in mind one thing though, that The investor-owned utilities today don't really want to be in that business, and they highlight that more often than not because they're not making any money off it. All these contracts that they engaged in, they basically say, I'm not making any money. There's no return on any investments. I'm just doing the work because you asked me to. And I'm charging what I'm charging because you made me go out and buy these expensive resources based on this legislation that you keep piling up one on the top of the other for you. So if you want that business, fine, but guess what? I'm stuck having to pay for these contracts that are not performing or too expensive, and somebody's going to have to pay for it. And CCAs will have to pay their fair share, just like my customers who are staying with me will have to pay their fair share. That's the argument that they present every time. It is a convincing one for the legislators and for the CPUC. And what we need to do is to continuously try to push against it and try to sort of help them ease out of business. Okay, fine, this is where you're at. Then maybe you slowly, which is going to ease you out of business. We just need to deal with those non-performing contracts that you have in a more effective way, so we don't have to be seeing these BCIAs change from year to year and from day to day in a substantial way that kind of threaten our way of existence. And that's what we're pushing with the CPUC. Let's fix the BCIA. Let's pay for it now and get rid of it, get it off our books, and use CPUC, figure out a way to ease the investor-owned utilities out of business slowly over the years. They are so far in the last year or two haven't been going to the market to buy anything. They just stopped completely, and all of them, not just Pacific Gas and Electric, because they've seen the CCAs coming continuously, whether it's LA or San Diego or everywhere now the CCAs are coming. The IOU is realizing that 80% of the California is going to be served by CCAs, and they're trying to figure out a slow, less disruptive way of getting out of the supply business and focusing on the water business. And we want to help them do that. And we want to help them do that without having our business be disrupted or having our survival be threatened. And I think we're doing a good job, right? You and the other comrades over there?
Yeah,
It's
yeah. I think you make a good point that we are often, I mean, the IOUs sort of talk about us like the boogeyman that are sort of throwing a wrench at things, but it's like you said, we are actually just, we're sort of moving along a transition that was already being supported by other things like the increasing decentralization of the grid, increasing popularity of distributed energy resources. This is something that I think the IOUs eventually are moving in this direction for other reasons as well. And it's easy to point at us, but it's a transition that is happening not even just in California. I think that's well put, that we basically want to steer them towards the direction that they are kind of moving in anyway, and try to not be destroyed in the process.
To Rod's point about their unquestionable, they have a natural monopoly, as Thomas said. They have a natural monopoly, which is the poles and wires, and that needs to be checked. And how is that? I mean, that's the whole idea of regulation. Is you have a natural monopoly, you can't just charge whatever you want. They've been cleverly shifting costs to start to keep sticking it to the load-serving entities like us, and that's where some effort needs to be taken.
That is something, just one quick reaction directly to that. It is something that we watch out for. One thing that they love to do is they'll switch costs. So, there's a generator, the generation rate, the distribution rate, and both their bundled customers and our customers pay the same distribution rate. But the generation rate is what our customers avoid because they switch to us. And one thing they love to do is try and recategorize costs over into distribution, because if they do that, then our customers have to pay for that, and also then their generation rate on paper goes down, which makes it harder for us. Then our generation rate has to be lower in order for us to say that we are providing a discount. So that's a favorite sort of sneaky way of trying to make things
green services or anything else where they're publicly trying to compete. You know, I mean, if you look at, you know, with San Jose making their decision and all, you know, there's a lot of information flowing, it appears, in terms of you can get the exact same green service today, and so San Jose should not be creating their own CCA. You know, so if they really want to have that business, I think their actions need to be aligned with, we want to get out of that business, because otherwise they're behaving as if they're still competing for that business, and then they have that ability to shift more of that. You made me buy this bucket of crap, and now we're going to be paying for that because while they're still competing with us and trying, I'm sorry, they're talking out both sides of their mouths. Their actions are not going to.
They are, and I think the reason for it is, and at least I've sensed it and heard it from a couple of people, both at the CPUC and some of the personal utilities, that the disruption needs to be gradual. When it's all of a sudden, when you go from 20% going to CCAs to 80% in the span of 3-4 years, the disruption becomes so strong to the point where it really hurts their operation. And what they would rather do is keep resisting. So just it's not resisting to actually completely stop you or reverse the momentum. That's not going to happen. I think they've given up on that already. But it's really resisting to kind of just slow you down, so you don't just come in and kind of turn in. It's the frog in boiling water routine. I think they don't want to be dumped into this boiling water immediately. They just want to gradually have that happen so they can boil slowly.
As long as they're boiling.
Nancy, I know you had a.
As long as they boil,
for a
they're
while.
fine.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm hearing something here, and I want to verify that I'm interpreting it correctly. So, we are here for a legislative and regulatory conversation about how to protect our interests as CCA, and that one of the biggest threats to our existence is the relationship, the cozy relationship, as Tom said, between the CPUC and the IOUs. And yet, I'm also hearing that they are potential partners where we could be more strong in the energy side, and they would be more strong in the delivery side. Is that correct?
Yes.
So part of the strategy, I think, really needs to be marketing. So what I'm hearing is that part of what we need to do is to educate the legislators, the CPUC members, the IOUs, and the public as to what is happening here. Is that right?
That is a big piece of it. And that, in that sense, the regulatory and legislative spheres kind of blend together. So we're just thinking about both sides.
I've only seen part of the strategic plan, but the strategic plan excerpts that I see here don't necessarily, it says use strategic lobbying to foster these things. It also sounds like just flat out marketing or business savvy would be also in order as well.
That is something actually, there's a separate section on
Yeah, there's an
marketing.
entire separate section on marketing.
We're planning as collectively with all CCA members to do a campaign of socializing the benefits of CCAs and creating this field without losing the differentiation of each CCA serving their territories. Actually, we have a meeting on this next week. And that would kind of create the marketing aspect of why we are here, why are we better, why are we a good disruptor to the landscape. The other side that what I'm talking about is having some put PG on a check or IOUs on it. You check their operation not being expensive rather than limited to T&D, and also put a check on their T&D charges and then shifting it to the us, which is existential threat.
I mean, businesses talk about this as the value proposition.
Right.
We need the value proposition for the regulator, and more particularly maybe for the legislators. And then yes, maybe something that's a little less policy wonky and dirty for the public. But we need an ongoing value proposition that says why we ought to be around for 5 years and continue to challenge ourselves. It's not only about our outward marketing, right? It's also about, frankly, our core mission.
Thinking about just how to sort of synthesize this, what I'm hearing is that we should put our top focus on, in terms of ways to achieve mitigation and our broader sort of landscape plan, we should focus on the regulatory structure in California, and not just defending, and not just keeping the status quo from getting worse, but trying to play a role in basically actively reshaping this such that CCAs have a secure place and that historical IOUs doesn't allow them the latitude to do sort of things that have made our creation difficult. I think that's how it seems like that's how we're not settling. So, and I had a response to one of your last points. We'll start with that, and then I think I could note in that you also have broader pieces like the RPS that could be implemented in the current regulatory structure, but could also be implemented sort of after changes that we've talked about, like we getting out of the supplier business. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is these fall secondary in that we can support these as we have the resources to allow, but that would be secondary to trying to achieve our mitigation aims through reshaping the regulatory structure. And that's something that, one thing about this too is that things like, you mentioned, Nancy, distributed energy resources like transportation and storage, we will actually also be addressing those through another important aspect of our business, which is programs. So that is something that we are very much devoting resources to, but in a different aspect, in a different part of our business. And in the meantime, on the legislative side, things like this, there will be lots of other allies that will be pushing these things. So I think this is a place where especially we'll look for partnerships, bills where we can kind of be efficient with our resource distribution because there will be other advocates pushing for those things. So but I like the idea of being proactive about reshaping. I think you captured the contradiction nicely, that there is an end state here where the IOUs and CCAs and other alternative procurement models can coexist. But we're sort of in a sticky transition state at the moment where there's a lot of inertia, and so that potential symbiosis is not readily apparent. But I think we can have a part in changing that. All right. Cool. Well, let's see. Let me jot this down. I feel like I have enough here to write something up that captures what we've talked about. Are there any other thoughts in this area? Things that we should be
changing regulated? You mean?
Oh, sorry. Not good there. More spelling.
I like the idea of a reverse pyramid because I think at this stage, existing is really important for us. PG&E is not going to sit around not doing anything. We will be facing competition, and no one is immune from competition. But I think as far as legislative actions are concerned, we need to focus on the immediate threat. Something like the SB618, which the league is tracing pretty diligently, is something that could affect the regulatory structure. So I think focusing on the immediate threat to our existence is important. And I think focusing on building and establishing ourselves
to be a notable player in the whole picture is number one, at least at this point. Next year, 1 year from now, when we can be better established, we can build up the pyramid and migrate to the next stage. But I think, as I'm sitting here now, focusing on recruitment, enrollment, and our existing is the key. I mean, building a solid ground for ourselves.
Thank you. It's true, and I think you make a good point that even in just a year, with the number of CCAs that are coming online in the next year or two, we're going to see not only more CCAs, but also a much broader diversity, geographically, economically, likely in priorities once these CCAs are formed. And that's going to be really good for us legislatively, because we've had so far mostly a cluster in Northern California with some local sections. We now have Redwood Coast Energy Authority up north and Apple Valley and Lancaster Coast Energy in the south. But in the next couple of years, legislatively, we will have a lot of leverage, especially to argue this stuff. Once we have enough geographic spread to sort of nullify the argument that the CCA model is something that's designed for basically a wealthy demographic that is clustered in the Bay Area. So I think that this pyramid fits well with the way the community is evolving, in that we should be in an even stronger position to make these arguments in the next year or two. So, all right. Does anybody else have thoughts on this? Steve, do you have something, or you just came in something like that?
You start from the beginning too. They didn't get it. I'm a quick learner, so.
It's almost lunchtime, so I assume you're up next.
John shows up.
Did you bring coupons?
Where's the ice cream?
Did you bring coupons?
Howie cut me short. I was going to bring it last night, but Howie said, John, you're talking to one more. Couldn't bring it up.
I was gonna, make a suggestion that we go pretty much. I'm gonna have to leave at 1 o'clock. When they're out. And I know the last item is, I'll stay on to the last item, which is how we want to communicate our time period and all that. So I'll email that to you. Hopefully it has that information. But would anyone be opposed to working with that?
I'm fine with that. Are you guys?
I assume we work.
All right. I want to give time for everybody to mingle, but that's fine. If you guys are working to that.
I did that last week this week too.
All right. Well, if anybody has further thoughts on this in the next few days, feel free to shoot me an email. I want to touch briefly, now that we've kind of laid out a platform, I want to talk about, we kind of touched on this a little bit already, but the fact that even among the subjects that we care about, there are enough bills that sometimes we're not going to engage with all of them, even if they're on topics that are relevant to us, if they are not an immediate threat. So basically, I want to run this past you guys and make sure that you're aware that this is happening and that you're okay with this, that I will be basically using the principles that we talked about. I'll be looking at the bills that are out there and basically making a judgment call with the help of my counterparts throughout CalCCA about which ones are worth putting a big effort into and which ones we can either leave to other stakeholders who more or less whose interests align with ours, or we can just leave them alone because there's a good chance that for other reasons they're going to die, not get out of committee, etc. So this is something that this is my plan. I will report to you guys on a monthly basis about the ones that we are watching and that we're working on. You'll know about some of them anyway because I'll be reaching out to ask for phone calls and meetings and whatnot. But also, if there are specific bills that you guys have questions about or that you're concerned about, feel free to email me and I can say, either we're looking into this and this is why we don't need to worry about it, or we can add it to the watch list if it's something that has slipped through the net. So that goes without saying. You can reach out to me at any time with questions about specific bills. So, there we go.
Is anybody opposed to that recommendation?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. I got.
No, I can't see how you're going to be effective if you have to wait for us, so makes sense to me.
That's Nancy.
Yeah, sorry.
Ah.
Yeah.
So Silicon Valley Leadership Group has an energy policy committee. Have you approached them about sitting on that?
I have not. Silicon Valley Leadership Group.
I would advise it.
And what areas do they like? I guess who sits on it?
Carl Guardino, the Silicon Valley Leadership Group represents about, I think, somewhere slightly fewer than 400 corporations in the area, and they send representatives to represent the city, represent the corporations in the area. So it might behoove Silicon Valley Clean Energy to look into joining that.
We are actually active with them. May 25th, they have a kind of a summit, and we're represented there in joining with the Peninsula as well. And we're
Oh, excellent. I didn't know that.
Yeah, their policy committees review legislation and then advocate. So because we are a business, because Silicon Valley Clean Energy is a business, and Silicon Valley, it seems, like a good.
Yeah, the only questions right there are all private businesses really take quasi.
Well,
But that's a discussion. Tom and I talked about it
honestly,
months ago. We should figure it out.
quite frankly, until last year, they wouldn't even entertain any conversation about CC. They wanted to stay out of it because of one business.
Right.
It's a member, PG&E.
Right.
Are you
Now we are a player. My guess is they would welcome us as members. I can't see why they wouldn't. If they don't, that would tell me something too. But I think, and it's by revenue, I think.
Yeah, but we're also governmental, so like.
I understand. So they may or may,
There may be a policy.
but they're powerful.
Yes.
We can look into it. I
Do
think
not-
it's a good.
I'd rather have them than our 10.
Are you
It's only
engaged with
captured by
California
PG&E.
This is something we don't actively meet with them regularly, but we sometimes overlap with them in policy positions.
Well, they take positions on various policies, so.
I know, they did a letter on 618, but thank you. That's another one that we can.
Yes.
That's true. We
Likely
haven't
that
been
the
actively.
lobbyists that work with unis and California cities and us probably interact up in Sacramento more often than not.
We just had the executive director of California League City at dinner last night, so.
So we should be working with them.
Yeah.
And another one that we sometimes team up with is CMUA, the Municipal Utility Association, because that's another one that since they have a very similar structure to ours, we often have aligning interests. So, but thank you guys. I can follow up with both of these. That's a good. Those are good partners. So.
Yes, some of them may be taking positions against this.
I'm sorry?
They may be taking positions against this actively, not knowing, right? So it's important for the partner to be able to discern.
We can work together on that. That falls into marketing and public affairs as well. So that's a good point.
I worry that the league is like in the cities. Positions that would counter what we would take. I don't think it's out of our
Are there positions? What specific positions have they taken that are counter to our interests?
I worry about 618, but I don't know for sure if they've taken it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. And at times I've seen that happening, and when I was working for the utilities, often that you find that the cities, all the cities in California, taking positions that were contrary to the unis' interests, because 75% of the cities reside in investor-owned utilities service territory. So you got a point.
Yeah, but their premise is about, seems to always fall on local control, they seem to. That's one of the few common ground frameworks they have, and they might not understand that CCEs are sort of a local control kind of thing. And so part of it is explaining things in their nomenclature, what we're doing. So many of us here get involved. California systems. We should approach the local divisions too, just because that encompasses all the cities each borough is engaged with, or the boroughs.
One thing also, I don't know if this is ever going to be possible, but I would be really curious to see whether there's any way that we could ever get labor on our side, because they have no philosophical, they basically, yeah, I know, that's okay. I feel like that face is appropriate. But,
sorry, poker face.
but, you know, they sort of, I'm interested to see a couple, like 5 or 10 years down the road, and they have no philosophical reason to be against local procurement autonomy, but they have a pretty strong, fairly immutable, historically, alliance with the IOUs, so that's a long shot. But
Things are changing.
Things are changing. So, and I think that one thing that can help with these efforts is the marketing campaign that you mentioned that we'll be doing through CalCCA, which will not be branded as any one of us, but just a general education. This is what a CCE model is, and this is why it's important to get it established in California. So we will keep you posted on that. So we're the marketing committee, all of our committees at CalCCA are fairly new, but we're getting geared up. So that said, so I will translate our conversation into a draft that I'll distribute to you guys. Do we have any further questions before we want to break for lunch? And then we can, once everyone has food, we can go into reviewing bills and talking about advocacy protocol.
So since we're a regular round meeting, I think it's an appropriate time to ask if there are any comments from the public.
Thank you.
So, James Talea, resident of Sunnyvale, former PG&E employee.
We love you.
Yeah, it was actually hard to be there when San Bruno happened. It seemed like everybody worked there. A couple of things. I think that what Director Sinks and Chairperson Rennie, when we're talking about relative to efficiency and costs, having been there and seen how PG&E allocates costs of their overhead across programs, across everything, that's a key piece of why a CCE can be more competitive, part of the value proposition. And digging into finding the examples of costs that really shouldn't be applied to certain things, I think that's a fundamental challenge, and that PG&E will continue to do everything it can to defend their ability to get these costs recovered and not worry about it. They don't want to have the details of it exposed, because they try every which way from Sunday to allocate all sorts of costs into various buckets so that they can keep doing what they're doing. And it's disruptive if it happens quickly to try to change that. So some of what I heard here, I think, is backed up by, in my experience anyway. And I think I would say it's the CPC relationship. It's less about them being cozy. It's them just not having the manpower that PG&E has to cleverly account and allocate all these costs. And the CPC can't find all that in a reasonable way in their audits that they do regularly. Although if maybe through CalCCA or other ally, if someone could dig into the audits that CPC does of certain programs, because all the data is there, and find some juicy examples of how what they're doing is wrong. So the costs bear out that is an important piece of the long-term puzzle, and I think that it's a fundamental nature. It actually goes back to decoupling. That they used to just be able to make money on selling what they sold, electricity and gas. And so this is really, it's a function of how they had to be restructured back when their current cost recovery rate of return deal was made 40 years ago or so. So it's an artifact of that, but it's come to this where they're very inefficient and they've got all these costs. And that's what's driving a lot of all this stuff, because they want to keep all those people working on all the stuff they want to work on in those buildings that I used to work in and all over the place. So, and it's hard for them to, so enough said about that, I think. I would also agree about what I heard suggested about the building partnerships for the long term with other allies. It's not just the other CCAs, it's other legislative allies and regulatory allies, because others may, so even though you want to focus on the existential stuff to begin with, that's the focus, but because partnerships take a long time, when I identify who those partners are in legislation in the future and start building those partnerships. Don't spend a lot of time on it, but they won't be there unless you do a little bit of nurturing in the beginning, in the early stages. Thank you.
So shall we take a break for 10 minutes and reconvene at 5 after, give you a chance to get lunch and bathroom? Sounds good.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone. All right. So we do have everybody.
I think you can go ahead and start while they're back there.
All right. Well, indeed. Okay. So, having talked more broadly, let's zoom in and look at some of the current stuff that is moving through the legislature. So here's the big monster that we've been, this was kind of our first big fight of the session. I know you guys are already pretty well aware of it, but there have been some significant developments on that have ultimately led to CalCCA going neutral on the bill. So the bill, I believe it was April 19th, was heard in the Senate Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Communications. And there were some pretty intense negotiations leading up to that, partially due to the fact that we have some good allies in that committee now. Senators Skinner, Husky, and Hill stood up for us. And so ultimately what Bradford proposed was an amendment to the bill. So the bill was very short to start with. It was only 3 paragraphs, basically. And he proposed to strike out 2 of them, which are the 2 that involved allowing CPUC approval of integrated resource plans from CCAs, as opposed to the current status quo where they review them but do not have final approval authority. So this bill, the author offered to take those paragraphs out. As a little bit of background, there was very strong support for this bill in general. Bradford is well regarded, and it was, I think we were fortunate to get 3 major members of the committee to speak against it. The intel that we got from the lobbyists going into the briefing was that the bill was likely going to pass, regardless of CalCCA position. So we took the amendments, striking out the 2 worst paragraphs. There is one remaining one that talks more broadly about the CPUC using the integrated resource planning process to further broader climate mitigation goals. That one is a little more ambiguous because this is the problem with this bill. It is trying to change language that was instituted by SB 350 that has not been fully implemented yet, even the first time around. We are still in the process of going through the implementation via the CPC, the California Energy Commission, and the CPUC. So, to make a long story short, this bill has been narrowed down to 1 paragraph. The worst parts of it are removed, and it did pass through the committee. It later passed through environmental quality as well, and is now in appropriations. So, and actually, just to back up for a second, a quick bit of calendaring. So 1 week from today, the 19th, is the last day for policy committees to meet, and then a week after that is the last day for the appropriations committee to meet. After that, so that's a 2-week window, and then at the end of May, they go into a couple days of floor-only sessions, where bills have a chance to be brought to a floor vote, and if they pass, then they'll move on to the other house. So we're in the last couple of days, really, of committee deliberations and negotiation and amendments being made. And this bill essentially has been struck down in the sense that the worst parts of it have been removed, and we're continuing to watch it, but it's no longer the threat that it used to be, and is likely going to pass in this form.
Can you help us again with who helped us on the committee?
So we have Jerry Hill, and then Skinner. What is his first name? Yes, that's right. And then Wachowski. So we had those three, and they spoke up pretty actively in the committee, asking that those amendments be taken, and that also they set up provisions such that they couldn't change the bill later on and reintroduce the dangerous parts. So they did.
Which committee was this again?
This is Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications. And just as another little piece of insight, one of the things that made this bill difficult is that there is talk that Bradford, who is the author of this bill, may be in the running to chair that committee. So there was, I think, with that in the wind, there was some reluctance to sort of start a big fight with him because he's potentially going to be in a position, unfortunately for us, of pretty considerable influence in this topic area if that comes to pass. So,
who makes that decision?
I'm sorry?
Who makes the decision about who the committee chairs are?
That's a good question. I don't actually know that. It's probably a vote of some kind. But maybe it's a vote by the committee, but I
would appreciate it if you could follow up and tell us.
Okay. Yeah.
So why is it fair that CCAs have less oversight, less regulation? Is it because we're regulated by local officials who report directly to the public? Is that the thought behind it?
Yeah. The integrated resource planning process is designed as a check on the nature of the investor-owned utilities to make sure that they're, on one hand, building enough to meet demand, but also not building things that they don't need, and then charging ratepayers for an overbuilt grid. So exactly, the idea there is that we don't have a profit motive, and we have a board that is made up of elected officials who are already held accountable to the communities they serve. So we have a check there that investor utilities do not have, and that's why it makes sense that we should be doing planning on our part, and that we should have that on the record at the CPUC for them to see. But the level of oversight in the IOU's version of the IRP process was designed for a for-profit company that does not have a more inherent consumer protection built into its organizational structure.
Yeah. So my other question is, we have a strategy that 5 years from now, we think the state of California, in our ideal world, would be planning resources like this to make sure we were getting to our land current renewable portfolio standards or carbon free or whatever it was. If we had that strategy, we could then answer a question like, well, isn't it valid for, regulators to look at overall resources used in the state? Why is this a bad idea? And what's your answer? Right now, all we're doing is saying no. What's our yes? What is our offense on this?
For how planning should look like in a more diverse system?
How do we ensure that we have enough renewables? How are we linking, a more positive answer than no to the state wants to achieve this level of GHG reduction by 2020, 2030, and here's how we fit into the picture.
Keep in
Rather
mind,
than, we just don't like being part of the IRP.
that's an excellent point. And I would say our response to that is that the IRP is only one small piece of the full arsenal that the CPUC uses to enforce California's broader environmental goals. So we are under full jurisdiction of the RPS We participate in the resource adequacy proceeding. We participate in a number of other proceedings that are designed to ensure what you just said, which is that we can still enforce state level laws.
I didn't get the practical response. If I was a legislature in the state of California, I'd say, wow, you need a better answer.
What do you want demonstrated?
How are we going to, what do we imagine, if we think this is an important, either we say this is not an important function anymore, because the market will take care of it, or no, government has a proper role in trying to determine what the resources is. But you can't say there are these other mechanisms. No, what are they, right? And how are we, what's our answer to this? Besides, we don't want.
But it is
That's
a
my
valid
feedback
answer.
to you about it.
It is a valid answer that requires education as well. The RFP process is designed for a very specific function, which is to protect consumers from shareholder governed utilities from procuring more than they need. So the answer is there are ways basically they need to know about the tools that we have acceptable. And the RPS, we still have full ability to enforce a statewide RPS in a world where the IOUs are just wires companies and the CCAs do generation.
So I think one of the points that, just answer the question, they are required to do this by legislation. And legislation basically said to the CPUC, you're going to be the regulatory agency that will make sure that the elements of the IRP are in place by all the law-serving entities. So we, along with the IOUs and all the other law-serving entities, will provide that IRP. The difference between us and the investor-owned utilities here is that the CPUC told the investor-owned utilities, we're going to look at what you've done and we're going to approve it, not just look at it or say, yeah, this looks like it has all the elements that were required by the legislation, but we also want to make sure that we're going to approve it as well. Because we want to protect all your ratepayers. In our case, we basically said, you can look at our IRP, we have no problem with that. And you can make sure that it has all the elements that are required by legislation. We just don't care for you to tell us exactly how to acquire our portfolio in order to meet the letter of the legislation. So they will look at what we're going to do. They will see that. They just won't be able to tell us, now we need you to buy this type of resource versus that type of resource, which right now the FLT can do for the IOUs.
But to answer your question, because we are governed by a board, rather than see, you guys are the mechanism for approval as a consumer protection, and the others, they don't have one, so they have a CPUC. That's kind of the answer to why. Just no. It's not just a no. But we have a mechanism in place to do that.
Somewhat better. All right. Any other questions on 618? All right. And we can run on Bradford because he is likely to be, he's introduced anti-CCA legislation before and will likely continue to do so we'll keep an eye on it. But okay, so next one. This is Senate Bill 338, authored by Nancy Skinner. And this is an interesting one. Basically, it's designed to address the duck curve and the idea that we now have enough solar generated in California that the net peak, it used to be that the peak demand would tend to occur around midday when you have either heating or air conditioning on. And so historically our time of use rate structures were scheduled such that on peak was like noon to 6. And we tried to get people to shift use into the evenings. But that has changed now because we actually have so much solar producing in California now that we're hitting situations, especially in spring, when the weather is kind of mild. It's not really cold anymore, not very hot. So our demand is somewhat low, but it's very sunny. We've had situations in March where we actually had negative pricing in some places on the CAISO markets, where we essentially are hitting a point where we no longer want to be discouraging energy use during the day, and we instead need to be focusing on how we deal with this point in the evening when at the same time that the solar production is ramping down. Thank you. At the same time that the solar production is ramping down, with sunset, you have people getting home from work, and essentially you end up with a very steep ramping up period in which you need to have other types of generation coming online to replace this solar that's dropping off the grid. And it happens very quickly. You can see, actually I should have just put a duck curve picture in here, but it's happening very quickly because the sun goes down, the solar stops producing, and what that has resulted in some cases is an increase in the use of gas, because gas is very flexible, and you can use that to ramp up at the rate that you need to reduce to replace the fading solar. So this bill is trying to deal with that, and the way that they originally wrote it was that they wanted to require that utilities demonstrate that a certain percentage of the energy that they use to meet their net load peak was renewable. In other words, not gas. It's since been amended, and it's worth noting that Nancy Skinner, as we talked about earlier, she's generally very supportive of the CCA cause. And this was amended from its original form because there was a lot of pushback, not actually even just from us, from a lot of parties, that it's actually very difficult to monitor for an exact hour what your exact specific percentage from each type of resource is on that time scale. So it's since been sort of generalized a little bit in the language, but it's essentially now asking the CPUC to examine and consider establishing policies that would be designed to reduce the use of gas in the net load peak. And so this is something that we're watching because it's a very important problem to address. This is one of the fundamental shifts that's happening on the California energy landscape, that our solar is becoming so large that it's at risk of being larger than our demand in some cases, and it's producing this steep need for ramping in the evening. But there are many potential ways to deal with this. And some of them are much more efficient and easier to implement than others. So the original way that this was worded is, in some ways, the hardest and least efficient way, because it requires extensive monitoring and contracts that specify specific types of resources at specific times, which you pay a premium for that. On the other hand, one way that we could do this is to switch our time of use rate schedules over to a schedule that highly disincentivizes energy use during this evening ramp. It's kind of the opposite of the way COU was originally designed. You ask people to switch their use into the midday instead of into the evening. You can also go at it from a technology perspective and provide incentives and other market simulation programs for technologies that can help with this, other than gas. So storage, for example. If you have storage systems that can shift some of that solar, even like a 2-hour battery, you don't need something super long. But something that can help smooth out that fast evening ramp, that's another thing. So essentially, this is something that is making a lot of people nervous. The IU actually have come out in opposition to this as well, just because it holds the potential. It's a broad enough piece of language right now that it holds the potential, depending on how CPUC interprets this, for some pretty extensive new regulations. But the author is sympathetic to CCAs, so basically we are working with them to see kind of how we can do this in a way that acknowledges the importance of the problem, but creates a solution that is not unduly inefficient or difficult to implement. Because there are realistically a lot of different ways. This is a fundamental issue, and there are a lot of different ways we can address it.
To me, this looks like a bill that's good for us. The duck curve is a big problem for us that are trying to be, 100% carbon free, and really we don't want to increase hydro. We'd like to decrease hydro, so renewable. This could help solve the renewable problems. And so it sounds good. And this is a case where we could be more aggressive to start inserting ideas that will solve the duck curve that won't hurt us, for example.
Well, but if the legislation does the following, it requires utilities to buy a bunch of really expensive battery technology, as they did solar 10 years ago, right?
That then,
The cost curve.
then in 3 years are
And
going to
then
be
that becomes effectively a grid charge. It's not clear, right, if that's it puts the CPUC and the IOUs in the driver's seat once again, and God knows they figure out how to ship it. So it's not obvious. I mean, while acknowledging the problem, it's not obvious that we want to give the CPUC more authority.
I agree with that.
You know, are these IOUs authority to do anything more?
So these policies and procedures, are they really only relevant to the IOUs and the CCAs, or would it also be like consumer policies and procedures? So, for example, if we were going to have a rebate program for people who want to invest in solar, then we say, okay, well, you only qualify for the rebate program if you have that 2-hour battery storage capability to deal with this duck curve. So,
Yes.
How far-reaching is this?
This would be more just the utilities, the low-serving entities, because the consumer rebates are, to my understanding, housed more over in the Energy Commission, and that's, since those are separate programs. I mean, if it's assuming that it's a state program, there isn't a distinction there. If it's a program that we offer through our own revenue to our customers, we could put that stipulation on. But this is designed more for a scope of utilities. So it's.
Yeah, I asked that question because looking at the record that you've got, 13,000 megawatt, whatever, right? If a lot of that generation is coming from consumer products on the rooftop. To me, it should be an equal playing field, right? It should be something for the IOUs, but also something for the consumer who's really taking the lead and saying, I want carbon-free, greenhouse gas-free energy options for my house.
It would not surprise me if this is not the only bill. We may in fact see legislature in the next few years that bills up this and does something similar to that.
I mean, this is basically what Howard convinced me not to invest in solar, right? Because you can't store the energy anymore.
Well, this is a good example, I think, of as you guys were saying, this is a good example of a bill where there's potential conflict between our interest in sort of improving the broader energy landscape and our interest in sort of protecting our own ability to operate freely as a business, because this is something that, as you were saying, Rob, it does address a question that we want to be part of the solution for, but it does give this sort of broad CPUC jurisdiction that we won't necessarily know how that shakes out for us until it gets passed and then fought out with the CPUC.
So is there a better place to put this than the CPUC? Or eventually, if it's a regulatory thing about the rates have to be X, Y, it's got to go to them, but maybe they're not the ones to design the solutions. They're another government entity or somebody to hand it to design the solution. Because I think Nancy probably doesn't want to design the solution. She just said, well, CPUC is probably somebody who could do it, but maybe we can suggest a better entity for that.
Well,
probably we should look at this bill just like all the other bills that at one point or another gave incentive to the customer to do certain things. I.e., for example, NEM, net energy metering. That was something that allowed customer to say, hey, putting solar on my rooftop is a good thing because the utility is going to pay me this much. So the bill compels the utilities to either pay the customer or do certain things that will make encourage people to put solar on the rooftops. Same thing we see here. This is going to be another legislation that will say to the utilities, all low-serving entities or the munis or CCAs or DAs or whomever, basically you are be obligated to pay for certain things that the customer may do in order to help deal with the duck curve problem. So if a customer puts in energy storage, for example, right next to the solar, there may be a way that this bill eventually will help compensate that customer for doing so. Right now, they don't have that.
Yeah, can I just make a recommendation that we add consumer protection to this reverse pyramid here?
Consumer protection
If
from
our customers are consumers' rights and protecting their ability to, I guess, be somewhat independent.
Well, we have rate payer protection or rates of rate, but it's not on there, so it should have transferred out there. Just what you're saying more or less,
Yeah, that's often on the list of munis, for example. They always look for, we need to protect our consumers from having to pay exorbitant prices for these actions and these decisions that you guys do all this.
And the easiest solution, especially with a bill like this, where you have an author who is sympathetic, is to just have language that says, "This is great for the IOUs and for the CCAs. The board will consider these things." So that's our sort of go-to strategy for things like this, where the overall sort of purpose of the bill is not what we disagree with, but we just want to make sure that it doesn't drag us into a set of requirements that the CPUC and the IOUs have more influence over than we do. So we have not. The CalCCA is still neutral on this. We're still watching it and talking, and so
that's where again, if we have a strategy for addressing that curve as a CCA policy body, we could go to this author and say, "Here's what we think we should enshrine in the law." Something that puts us in the equation but doesn't submit us to, this regulatory framework.
Well, we're also.
But empowers us to help drive a solution.
We're also very young, so hopefully, at least by next session, we can do more of that.
Yeah.
I think, especially for SVCE, we're working towards that, definitely. Okay, 100. This one's fun. Oh, sorry, was there a question? Okay, so SB 100, this is one that was introduced relatively late, and this is a very high-profile bill. So we've got Kevin Leon. He actually spoke at the symposium on business of local energy last Friday, for those of you who were there, which was kind of interesting because he has not actually historically been a huge CCA supporter. So it was kind of, I thought it was a nice strategic move on the organizers' part that they showed him what is probably the largest number of CCA people in one room at one time ever. So that was kind of a brilliant move on their part. But, so leader of the Senate, he has been a big champion for a variety of pieces of...
I'm going to interrupt for a second. Yeah. For the folks that will be going to the meeting today at 3:30 with Assemblyman Law, they want to move the meeting to 2:30 instead of 3:30. Any objections to that?
I'll second it. Let's see, okay. That's going to be no.
I'll just try to contact my constituent and tell them that we need to move it.
All right, Howard, how's that for you?
Hey, I'm on borrowed time anyway, depends on what the doctors say, so 2:30 is just as good.
Okay.
Rob?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is that it?
All right, yep, we'll do 5 of us. Yep.
We'll be done in about 2.
Yeah, we'll probably wrap up before 2. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so this is, hey, we gotta get through these here. So, SB 100, this is a bill, it's very high profile, it's essentially updating, kind of supercharging the RPS. So they want to go to 100% renewable or zero carbon, which is a big difference, by 2045, and then they have some interim targets, 2023, 2026, that are basically just pushing forward a few years the current RPS standards that we have. So this is probably, this was introduced pretty late, and essentially we're still in the process of doing the initial review. It's very likely going to pass in some form because it's so high profile.
Has Has it been amended? Because when I last read it, it did not have the zero carbon in it. And I wrote to it and called his staff to complain.
It does have that now.
Okay, good.
It does have that now. And thank you for that. If you were one of those people, thank you, because I was very concerned about that until I realized that zero carbon was in there.
Yeah,
as
the
well.
day it was published, I called and emailed and said, this doesn't work at this renewable.
Yeah, that would be pretty much a deal breaker. But this is one that I put on here less because it is directly threatening to us and more because it's just so high profile. I think we should be watching it. If anything, we potentially have a chance to slip something into it because of the high profile nature, it is probably going to pass. So we're looking through what's in there, talking to our allies, and I'll keep you updated on that. Sort of make sure there's nothing threatening in it and see if there's anything that we can put in it that would be good for us. Other than the RPS, we also have some transportation electrification, or sorry, not electrification, but decarbonization happening in the heavy-duty trucking sector, and potentially a removal requirement for pipeline gas, which is out of our jurisdiction, but would be excellent.
Gas renewable in any way, but kind of burning garbage.
There are a variety of ways. Yeah, you can do landfill methane. You can use electrical synthesis methods to produce artificial gas.
So you're still perhaps burning that. You're so claiming that the things to do it you are offsetting.
This is biogas, so they consider it carbon neutral.
Yeah.
I don't see how this bill could pass. I mean, just to me, 28 years have solved somehow a way to run renewable all night long, or have enough storage to take care of nighttime. We're going to generate more garbage so we can get to natural gas. I don't understand how this is possible.
It's a couple of things. I would say, first of all, I think this bill is going to be heavily edited. I think that, especially from the number, you can tell he was going for a big splash, and I think this is probably a maneuver on his part, at least to start high and say this is what I went for, and then blame it. Like, you could blame it on other people who sort of drag down the dream. But I think that it is probably going to be scaled back. I would say also the zero carbon piece, that makes a huge difference, because then you can count things like large hydro that can play sort of more of the base load role. So it's probably going to pass. What I have heard, the intel that I've heard from our lobbyists on this is that think of this more as this is the part that matters, that they're basically just going to push forward the earlier RPS interim targets by a couple of years, and that the 100% is more of a showpiece that may get knocked out before it's finally implemented. So we're keeping an eye on that, but this is also a nice opportunity to engage with De Leon, because we just came off of him giving the keynote at the symposium, and he's expressed concern. He has been a very strong supporter of underprivileged communities, and I think I have heard that he's had some concerns about the nature of the ZCA model, sort of the false reputation that it's designed for wealthy communities. So this would be a good opportunity for us to engage with him and educate him more about the fact that that is not in fact the case. So, any other questions on this one? All right, moving on.
Like, when you engage with him, what would you be pushing for?
You mean
what are we offering him? We're supporting him, or what would we suggest he do with that bill? Because it's that's the huge aspirational goal of the state. How do we offer some help or support?
We emphasize to him that we share his priorities in that there are CCAs like us that are basically already doing this. So we demonstrate to him that we have aligned values in that respect. We emphasize to him that our model is more flexible and nimble than IOUs because we're more locally based. So if he cares about mitigation, not only are we going carbon free sooner, but we also have the types of community ties that the IOUs don't have that allow us to run programs to get other types of decarbonizing technologies
out into the communities. So we emphasize to him, the way we approach him is that we emphasize that he should not be putting all of his faith in the investor-owned utilities to achieve his environmental goals, and that we are a strong and available partner for decarbonizing the economy and also for serving the communities that he has been championing so far.
So, where exactly, which Senate district does he represent? What is that district, and is there a CCA operating?
There is not currently one in his district.
Los Angeles, someplace?
Yeah, the exact number I don't remember, but there's one potentially forming there. And if the Los Angeles one does come to fruition, that would be huge, because just population-wise and also politically, they're just very different from the other CCAs that are in operation so far. So,
I might like to suggest that a strategy is, here's what it could do for the district you serve. And because we know you have concerns about this just being cherry-picking elite communities, here's how we think specifically this model is absolutely replicable to communities that are not economically so successful.
and I
That's
think
why it's good for residents of those communities that are struggling to pay their bills.
And another thing that we can play up with him is our ability. I mean, if he has the twin priorities of caring for underprivileged communities and also furthering environmental goals. And as CCAs, because we don't have the legacy of over procurement, this is like what we're doing. We can provide 100% carbon-free power at a discount to what PG&E uses, to what the investor utilities offer. So we can combine those two priorities of his in a way that other models really cannot.
Does he have concerns for rural parts of the state that are not doing so well? The argument could be a little.
I have not heard him say specific things about rural communities, so that's I'm concerned. All right, 87. So this is one north of Line. He's just to the north of us, up in Peninsula Clean Energy. And so this is another one that has been already doctored, but in this case, not quite enough for us. How CCA is proposing this. So this one is kind of more esoteric, but it deals with how you calculate emissions coefficients for energy from unspecified sources. And the idea being that the original form of the bill wanted to calculate hourly coefficients for unspecified sources. And an unspecified source, CCAs do, at least at the beginning, tend to use more of those in the IOUs because we don't build our own, we don't have the credit history yet to build our own projects. So we buy resources from third-party brokers. And this is something that basically, I would put this sort of a tier below in that it's not something like 618 that is a fundamental threat to our existence, but this type of change is difficult for us to. It's a bill that basically technically doesn't make a lot of sense because it was asking for something that we actually don't monitor for the California Balancing Authority. You can track what's being imported and exported on a monthly or yearly basis through the contracts, but CAISO does not actually monitor in real time what energy from what plants is crossing the borders. So this is a bill that was designed to make sure, essentially it was designed to make sure that we were not importing coal from other places, from outside the California balancing areas, and basically not being told, not disclosing it. But the thing is, there is also already a way to capture that if we're doing it in the cap and trade system, because utilities that buy power from outside the California balancing area have to buy allowances if it's fossil energy that's coming in. So this is a bill that really pertains to us more peripherally because we tend to use, we being CCAs in general, not us specifically, use more unspecified power. And so we're basically trying to remove that entirely. And it's gotten, at this point, slimmed down to, let's see, it's gotten slimmed down to this point where they talk about, we would like to look into creating time-differentiated
emissions factors, but they took out the requirement for hourly. And that's good for us, but we're trying to narrow it down even more because that's something that at this point technically is difficult to do. So, also, this author, Levine, is another one who's pretty friendly to CCAs. So, what I'm hearing from the lobbyists is that they're pretty open to removing that entirely because that was not their intention. That they thought they had already struck it out. We just took out the explicit requirement. So, this is a less important one, but we're monitoring nonetheless. And then this is one that, this is the last one I think, right here. So, AB 920, this one gets back to the question in SB 100 about baseload. It's, again, dealing with the IRP, and it's asking the CPUC to evaluate the resource mix in load-serving entities' portfolios and determine the need for new renewable baseload generation. I have heard the word on the street is that this is a carve-out bill for biogas and geothermal, that there was the hope is that it might lead to more investments in those. But essentially it's a way of ensuring, it's designed to ensure that we can move toward a more closer to 100% zero carbon future without running out of baseload, which has been one of the concerns about higher renewable systems. So this is one, actually, I had to say this because the board had not technically voted when I put this slide deck together, but CalCCA's position is opposing as amended that we should replace load-serving entity with electrical corporation, which would then restrict it to the IOUs and institute for CCAs language similar to what they have in there for munis, which is that you guys should have the right to examine our resource mix as you see fit and talk about if we need renewable baseload, but that the CPUC should not be allowed to sort of Deus Ex Machina and tell us that we need to procure some. So that's one that we're working on getting some clarifying language in there that would basically just narrow the jurisdiction of the CPUC's new authority here. So that's that one. And that is
Again, does that go back to the problem of an ISU not buying enough? I mean, why would, wouldn't we as a CCA also be not buy enough baseload either?
Well, as being 100% carbon free, we're actually already taken care of in this area in that our renewable baseload is, our carbon free baseload is large hydro. So for us in particular, the aim of this bill is somewhat redundant because we're pretty much already there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, it's probably not large hydro that's bringing the base resource because we're buying our renewables and carbon on an annual basis, so eventually they add up. So in certain hours, we're buying a lot more than what we need, and then other hours that makes up for the other hours that at night time that makes the base load. The reason why this at this point is not working for us is that some of the base resources, some of the renewable base resources are fairly expensive, mainly geothermal. They come at about 8 cents a kilowatt hour, and obviously we, as well as everybody else, is looking for a way to reduce that because sooner or later the nuclear power is going to be done with. The PG&E's 2,000 megawatt nukes are going to be out in 2025, and you're going to need some base resources. And this will keep coming back until we figure out a way to put some base resources into the mix. Large hydro is not. Large hydro just gives you minimum releases. That's your base resource, and that's very small relative to the amount that would be required comes 2025.
But is there even enough geothermal available to be a full base load?
There's there's about 2,000 megawatt worth of geothermal that done in Prairie irrigation, and they've kind of bringing in 100 megawatt at a time. But they have a heck of a time doing that because they're coming in at about 8 cents a kilowatt hour, where the rest of the renewables are coming in at, solar is coming at 3 cents nowadays.
This is there to force the investment because we would all
Yes.
be forced to buy it, and that would free up the business models for these guys that are trying to build it, because they would say, we now have all these dedicated customers that are required by law to buy it. So that's what the goal is.
Yeah, and it may die this year, may die next year. I'm almost certain it's going to keep coming back.
They got to come up with a plan for base load.
They have to, yes.
And
You can't keep asking for renewables and greenhouse gas free, and at the same time, not try to help those base resources that are renewables.
And we already went through this, so stance being that we're gearing up to do this, and especially in the next couple years once we've got some new CCAs online in Southern California, this will become even more of an option. So this brings us to our last piece, which is getting you guys involved. And I want to hear from you guys just kind of what your preferences and expectations are around getting involved, being contacted. Are there specific ways that you prefer to be contacted? Are there specific types of bills that you are personally interested in? Do you prefer going to Sacramento for a meeting, phone calls? Sort of, what are your guys' thoughts as people who have done this for a long time as well?
So before we begin that discussion, can you just go back one slide
Yeah.
to the originating legislation, and can you maybe talk about how the Cal CCA intends to prioritize these different bills, and or is it too early because you guys have just formed? How are you are you doing an inverse pyramid? How are you guys prioritizing what to focus on?
For when we're originating legislation? Or for the bills that we just...
For the bills that we just talked about, are you doing a similar exercise with the Cal CCA?
We do, yeah. Yeah, that's, the legislative subcommittee does that. And we rank them by immediate threat to CCA integrity being the first one, like 618. After that, it's going to be likelihood that this is going to take care of itself without us getting involved. So there are bills, for example, there are a couple that I had in an early deck of this that I just took them out because they either died or someone else came in and basically asked for the amendments that we were going to ask for. So at that point, it's already been amended. There was no point in us even getting involved. So it's degree of emergency first, and then resource efficiency second. And then I would say third, we also look at impacts on long-term relationships with key supporters, trying to make sure that we don't put them in positions. We try and not put them in positions that are unduly damaging to them because they have invested a fair amount in helping us along early in the process, and we appreciate it. So that's the rough hierarchy. We try and be as efficient with our resources as possible, but obviously sometimes there are things that are such immediate threats that you have to just sort of throw everything at it.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Thanks.
So yes, what do you guys think about also what you prefer and what you find most effective? Should I be focusing? Sorry.
before you talk about engaging us that way, there's data that they can give us. And I've seen the thing with the Cities Association. I provided you a copy, which was the matrix, so that we understood what was on the radar and where we've taken positions and where we didn't. It seems like, is that what the plan is, to communicate with us where we stand?
This is something that I'll start including in the monthly update for you guys. Is a matrix like what you sent to me that has the bills that we've taken positions on, and that's something actually that I'll look into this. We should have published. The CalCCA should be publishing that as well. So, but yes, you guys will get updates.
So then that means we have a touch point at every board meeting. If there was something that came up at that point, would that not be the forum that we would say, here's the hot one?
That's true. We can have content discussions at the board meeting, definitely. I guess I was thinking with this more like short term, if something comes up that we need to push on quickly.
I was just trying to figure out what the base process was going to be. So
yeah.
That's the base process, and this is sort of the exception. When something breaks loose from committee, we need to respond right away.
Thank you. That's a good point. We'll have an update, and we can have discussions at the monthly meetings about sort of bills that we've taken a decisive stance on through CalCCA.
I'll follow up on a discussion I had with Dave on earlier this week. I think we ought to do all the following. We ought to have regular strategy sessions with between board members of other CCAs. You know, not everybody on the board, but if you have one or two from each CCA or that were invited, they could participate or not. But I think that ought to occur on some regular basis. Maybe that's every quarter or something. I think we ought to consider the same kind of ledge action days that other organizations participate in. You know, the League of California Cities has a ledge action day. They basically say, hey, if you want to help us go around the Capitol for a day, we have specific bills that are in play at this time. It's also a chance to connect on a regular basis in Sacramento. Silicon Valley Leadership Group does the same thing. Seems to me that once a year, perhaps, we ought to invite board members from various CCAs in the state to Sacramento to do the same thing, make our presence felt. I think in terms of the short-term stuff, generally we ought to empower you to through some board policy or whatever to take. To empower you to take very quick, to empower you to do what you need to do, right? I don't think we ought to be circulating emails to try to give you direction on every bill every week. I think, we need to give you some general direction, strategic direction, policy direction, but in terms of working the tactics of what bills are coming up and exactly what to do. I think reporting back to us is good, but I don't see us, maybe not even at every meeting, right, having some protracted discussion about ledge tactics. So I'd see, maybe those three things. One is could be a CalCCA sponsored meeting between board members across CCAs. The other is a ledge action day, probably annually. And then whatever we need to do to empower you to do your job.
I would say a couple things to that. First of all, starting with the last one, that's a good point. I will provide this update in the board packet. We don't necessarily have to discuss it. It'll be part of the CEO report, as it has been in the past. So if there are not specific things, we don't have to spend time on that, but it'll be there if people have questions.
If there's something big going on, and it's convenient to report to the board, I wouldn't mind a breakout. I sure wouldn't mind a breakout where, we're really focused on that.
Well, and also, if there are bills like 618, I will alert you at a board meeting if there's something like 618 that is an immediate emergency threat.
That might be an email, right?
Sorry?
That might be cause for you to distribute an email to everybody around the waiting for the next board.
So
that is one. Can I make one comment about the Legislative Action Day? I like that. I would say one thing that I forgot to mention about CalCCA is that in addition to forming committees, we are in the process of trying to build up our institutional staff as well. So the plan is that hopefully within the next 6 months or a year, we will have an executive based in Sacramento who can be kind of a full-time face. We're still deciding on sort of what the level of authority should be there and visibility, but essentially we're putting someone in a leadership position who could help coordinate something like that. So I think that's a great idea and something that we are looking into trying to make possible. But Rob?
I'm still working it through my mind. I was going to suggest maybe you put your report on the consent calendar as an information item to be accepted. And if we want to discuss it, somebody pull it off consent. Versus if it's buried in the CEO's report, we might ask questions, but it doesn't become kind of a full item for discussion. but I'm not sure if this works or not. I'm still thinking it through in my head.
I'm kind of all over the place. I'm hopeful that it's not a discussion topic unless we can all talk offline with you. But if there's something urgent that we need to know, that would be the point where it would be a discussion. Otherwise, it's just a consent information.
But so far, we have attempted to do regular reporting, whether on the marketing or legislative or regulatory. As part of my report, it's listed as here are the attached reports if you folks want to discuss any of them. The staff is almost there to answer your questions. If you want to separate them and make them separate consent, steady, ongoing consent item, that's fine too. So
That's certainly the way it's kind of structured at BTA. You've got a whole list of them.
The BTA, when we look at legislative stuff, what we have is something that's in what we call the board reading folder. So it's actually not even part of consent. If we need it, if there's something where we're looking for some discussion on, then it does get agendized. So it can get agendized, or it just goes into what we refer to as a reading folder. Also at BTA is when we look at this and staff looks at, hey, we need to take a position on something, staff will write that letter of support or opposition, what have you. And then it goes to the board chair, who then, unless the board chair has concerns about it, will then have that authorization to put their name to it. And so we actually, our letters of support will go underneath, for the agency goes underneath the signature of the board chair. And then if there are things when you want to see whether or not any board members or their elected bodies want to take action, that there's an awareness of what's there, and then board members can do that, but they're not doing it under the BTA letterhead. So only the chair goes out with the BTA letterhead.
there's one thing that we also need to keep in mind, that this agency is not it. There is the SVCE that we usually, after we've done here, we need to push that out to the larger group and get consensus over there. So that's why sometimes you just need, that's why we need the legislative platform. So if we need to move fast on something, that we do that without having to go back and try to get action from either the board or even the chair.
You know, if you look at the transportation thing, when we had SB1, we had Frazier, I don't remember the number on that one was, that didn't go before our board. It was, staff's assessment and all, and then also all the other agencies, and also that staff wrote up something, and then it just came to me for approval.
So in our situation, I would write a letter and send it directly to you, Rob, and you would sign it as the board of the chair, or as the chair of the board, and that would be representing us.
And as a comment on legislative day, this is pretty common. It's not the only one that should be doing it. I know that communities have done it forever. January 20th or whatever the day is, they start with a workshop in the morning for a couple of hours, so that all the issues are shared with everybody that will join up. Then after a couple of hours, everybody disperses and go visit with their legislative assembly people and their senators. So that's pretty standard. And I think we started it actually with SVCE back in January. We had a legislative. We all just went over there, and then from there we started visiting with legislators. So that's going to happen again next January. It's pretty standard. So it's there.
Did you invite directors to the lobby day?
No. Not. I don't believe not this time around. That didn't happen.
That's what needs to happen. We need to get people who are elected in front of people who are elected.
Mr. Chair, is there any action required? Required vote? Required vote?
I don't think so.
Just meeting, we have to vote on that.
Good job, thank you.
Thank you for coming. Well, I think what I'm hearing, how about this? I like the idea of a consent calendar. How about we move this to the consent calendar? It'll be in a matrix form like you talked about, Howard. And I will, if there's something particularly urgent, especially if there's something that I'm thinking in the coming month, we may want to invite you guys to do a meeting or make calls, I will move that down to the agenda, to the full agenda, and draw extra attention to it. But status quo can be in the consent calendar, and if anyone has questions, they can ask. But we won't plan for a full discussion.
I don't know what Howard gave you in terms of example of that matrix. I don't know if it was the VGA type of thing or not, but
It was the Citizens Association.
okay. But one of the things that in VGA, when we put that matrix together, it's not only what we have taken a position on, it shows anything that might be related. So by putting it into our packet, if a board member saw something where we haven't taken action on, they can ask questions, or they can say, hey, should we be taking a position on this? So it gives us an opportunity, where staff saying, we're not taking a position, or it's kind of a position element is blank. It allows board members to also look at something. So we kind of have both on there, so it's very clear, like on the last one, where it was SB1, it said, yes, we support it, and so everyone knows what that meant, the light went out, or
We get this regulatory report from one of the consultants that we hire, and in it, on a monthly basis, they have a matrix that shows everything that should be of concern to us. Mm-hmm. Then the next month we'll get the same thing again, but they highlight in yellow this now the language that got added to that new report. So you always have an idea about what's going on, and not only that, but also here's the new stuff that just came in for this month, and we could do something similar. Yeah,
I think that's reasonable.
So we can have our report kind of continuous, giving you an idea about what's been going on, and also here's some new stuff to look into.
And how do people feel about the letter idea, about having the board instead of, if we want to send a letter. Because oftentimes we'll do this, like we did this on 618, that CalCCA will take a position, but if it's something really urgent, it helps to have all the individual CCAs also reaching out. So as opposed to sending a draft to everybody and getting permission from at least a quorum, how do people feel about having you sign off as the chair, Rob?
I'm comfortable.
I think it was consistent priorities as defined.
Yeah, we've had this discussion, so I have in my mind everybody's thinking. Before he first came and asked me to sign, we hadn't had this discussion at all, and I'm like, well, do I guess? Do I just use my best guess? Or now I have, at least a lot in my mind of what people have said. So I'm much more comfortable now doing that.
I think that it always is the chair, right? And there's the ones that we get to discuss, and if we're going to take a position, the chair is going to do it. There's not time to discuss. It's the chair and staff's judgment as to whether it aligns.
I know there were some folks, especially in the beginning, who weren't quite sure, we didn't want to extend too much to the staff or the chair or whatever, but maybe now we're to the point where by some board action, as Sunnyvale does, for example, as we're trying to do at the Cities Association and elsewhere, we establish some states, some known positions, and as long as the board has previously taken action to say, okay, it's a priority of ours to advocate for X, Y, or Z, and the chair and the EXO think that, that position that we're taking in this letter is consistent with one of those states, then it becomes informational to us as board members, but you don't have to wait for a board meeting.
And that may require board action, because I know that before we showed it,
we were pretty restricted.
You already acted to say you need to be. You have to go back to the executive committee or to the board. So we're going to bring something to you that's a little new that would say pretty much what you just said. To the extent that we want to take a position that is consistent with the platform, we can do that with the signature of the chair.
I almost, thinking about a four quadrant, is it urgent? Is it important to us? Is it urgent and important to us? Is it not urgent? Is it important, so forth. So if it's urgent and important to us, I would sign it off. Anything in the other quadrants, most likely I wouldn't sign off.
Then we just put it at the next board.
Correct.
Part of the
Even if it's urgent but not important, meaning it's not one of these critical things, I probably wouldn't want to sign off on it.
So, for one thing, I hear what you're saying, and don't just necessarily disagree, but let me tell you what I don't want to see, and what I do want to see. I don't want to see that things start coming, that the letter comes to the board, and then we start submitting a letter, okay? Because one, for me personally, Hillary, I think, has done an outstanding job today. She has instilled a lot of confidence. She's not out there by herself, blown in the wind. She's got her pool of resources and pulling together with the whole organization structure and such. So I just don't want this to become, because sometimes we get to our discussion, elections do it everywhere, where you get down into the weeds. So you believe you're coming and you want to get more of a broader board support. It's got to be, what the legislation is, what the intent of the legislation is, and very clear what the positions are that we're taking. And I would hope that it's really only those things that are controversial where we're probably not 100% behind something. But no wordsmithing here.
I would suggest to you that, with all due respect, that the idea of doing urgent, important, unimportant, will make it tougher on us, because that becomes our judgment to decide what's important, what's urgent, and what's not urgent. So what I would prefer to do is to get a legislative platform agreed to by the board, leave it to the judgment of the staff to define. Now we need to take a position on this bill or that bill. Try to find Rob. We'll do our best. If we can't find him, I'll take the responsibility. But if we can't find him, that would be the best way to go. Hand him a letter saying this is consistent with the platform that the board approved. Please sign, and if he needs to change it, it's fine too. If not, signs and ship it out. That makes life a whole lot easier for us.
So if there's time for it to be queued up at a board meeting, you would do that process anyway? In my city, the mayor has the authority to sign letters and all that. But if, with rare exceptions, if she wants to say it's on behalf of the entire council, and there's time, then it has to come to the council. And the way you described it is we would never see anything if it was consistent with the platform, regardless of how much time we have.
You will always see everything in the monthly report. Every month you're going to get something that will say this is what happened, this is what needs to happen, here's how the legislation is shaping up. That is going to happen month in and month out. To the extent that we can figure out a way to get it to the entire board so that the entire board can take a position, that's fine. We'll do our best. But judging by what I've seen so far or what I've seen in the past, these things move so fast and the wordsmithing happen in real time, and it's almost impossible to try to pin it down to something that you can hand the board to say yes to without knowing that the next day somebody's going to come in and add a line here or add a line there, and now you're stuck with a board position that you can't get away from.
I think also if the sorry, go ahead.
So when does the CCL, your government marketing group, do they come along with an advocacy letter or an example?
They will, so both formally and informally. We will put together formal letters that Tom will sign off on as part of the CalCCA board. As staff, we also collaborate just informally among ourselves on putting together like pro forma letters.
Okay.
So,
because there was an AB 1250 for those that came out and was going to restrict the use of city powers. You had to go out contracts. If you're going to use outside contractors, you had to have study and exit study. So the League of California Cities said we're opposed to this, gave us an example letter, and we had it, read it, done it. I presented it to the city manager. The next day, our city mayor signed it and ratified it. Didn't go to council. Did it because it was advocacy. It was within our game plan, and was gone. And the council got the rest of the letter later on. But that's something that was boom right away. And if we couldn't get our mayor, we had our vice mayor. So I know that some people like to be concerned, but I like the approach that we have so much respect for Tom and Hillary. They know better of what's happening and the nuances of any kind of legislation going out there that we do. Now let's say we're talking about, an example, sanctuary cities. Now, our mayor could sign off on that, that would have to come to the council. But on the stuff like that, where the legislative body or the advocacy groups are saying, hey, you're on top of this, you need to do it right, I give complete trust and let the CEO and Hillary and the chair just do it and formulate it. And expediency, I agree with Tom, expediency, it does move quick. And sometimes you just need to do it. So I support giving them all the latitude they need and respecting their opinion and what they need to do on the council to come. I can't see that many items coming to council and the directors that would not be in the best interest of this board.
Also, if it would help, we can put, if we decide to do this, we can put the letters that we have sent out since the last board meeting in the packet along with the matrix update on bills so that everyone can see what we've been sending out, what Rob has been signing. And that way, we don't get into wordsmithing, but there's a general awareness.
We don't wordsmith, but it's exact. But also, as soon as they send it out, they CC the council. So, I mean, you don't have to wait for a board. I mean, it's easy. It's done.
Touche.
And now it goes to everybody, and it's done. So everybody's waiting. Oh, why didn't you put it by the top?
We do that as well at the TA. So anything that I'm signing within a reasonable window of time, there's what we call a board communication package. And we got letters from people that's in there. The letters that I sign are in there, so it's just all the general communication comes out as an email to all board members. You don't have to queue them up.
And what's the advantage of doing the queue right away? If you need some support to our local elected, the higher elected officials, everybody's on board, knows what's going on, instead of waiting to the city just work it out. So that way you bump into something to take support.
The other thing in terms of if we look at protocols and such, I think if there are things, as an agency, we've been talking about as an agency, speaking as an agency, but I would also say that if there are certain things that are happening, legislation is happening and all, where it's more than just the CCA, that really to make a difference, to help move the needle, we need to have the cities who are basically contracted to the CCA. If you need that, I think we need to have probably some sort of protocol. How do we do that? Is it coming through the board's taking it to, so we may want to think about, I don't know how often that may happen. If it's rare, let's not worry about it, but if there's an opportunity where it's great to have, Rob's signature on something from our agency, but my gosh, if we have something from the cities as well, it's even more oomph and help us distinguish those things.
I think you're bringing up a really good point that the strength that we have behind us are you and not. We can't give money to elected officials. We are not allowed to do that as a public agency. So the only strength that we have behind us in order to move anything in Sacramento is going to be you and the cities that stand behind you. So definitely we'll do our best to kind of leverage the fact that you are there supporting our cause.
And make sure it's very clear when we're looking for the city's support. What is like red flag? We really need to do this versus, if you want to, that's fine. If you don't want to, that's equally fine. But
occasionally we get snookered on a low priority kind of marginal issue, but we should not do that to our cities. We should make sure it's the really clear ones where we need a full quota price.
Yeah.
One thing that would be really helpful, actually, could we establish a list for each of your cities? If you have a designated staff person that if I'm reaching out, whether I should reach out to you or if there's a staff person that I should reach out to directly, would you guys mind sending an email to Andrea with your designated person for that?
Don't we already have a list of all the staff liaisons?
No.
We're allowed to use Steve Addinger, so you can send it to Steve Addinger to ask for support.
You have lists compiled for your sustainability managers or contacts that's soft in some places, and then communications. But that may be different than the legislative.
I think it is, yes. And I'm wondering if it's a legislative person or the city clerk. And you guys tell us who would be the designated person that when I go to the city council, who would be the person that we need to go to?
So if you take an action item and send us an email, reminding us to do that. So I think every city is going to be different.
So Steve Addinger is our sustainability manager, and he would just give it an okay and send it to our city manager. So that would be the best.
My sustainability manager is the IT manager, finance manager.
All right.
So that makes those be underneath more cities.
Well, thanks for bringing that up. That was the next. Thanks for bringing that up. That's an excellent point about getting the cities involved as well. So is there, are there any other pieces that we think that people would like to cover in terms of protocol? I think we're going to move the legislative matrix to the consent calendar unless there's something extenuating going on, in which case I'll move it to the agenda. Letters will go to Rob for sign off after I draft them, likely with help from CalCCA. You'll probably get to look at it too.
No, I don't see you.
If you want to. I'm just going to be writing these things and no, so I'll send them to you, Rob, and we'll CC the council when it goes out so everyone can see what's been going on. And I will make a note in my matrix just as a heads up if things are likely to result in needing additional attention in the coming month before the next board meeting. I'll try to put a little note in there for you guys so that sort of things are on the horizon.
In terms of putting it on the consent agenda, it needs to be agenda is clear. And because the eyeball about putting it on consent is, are we taking action or non-action? So make sure the agenda is very clear in terms of, is it on the consent calendar as an information item only versus it on there for actual board action. Okay,
good point.
To me, there's a difference what your purpose is in putting it officially on the agenda. So if we can make that delineation, like you do on all other agenda items, make sure this one is clear.
It won't make the agenda unless there's action required. It would be on the consent, just in general.
Yeah, consent is informational. Does anybody have any further questions or issues with that proposal? Does that sound good? All right. Well,
that brings to a close.
We have covered everything that I have. Does anybody have further questions? We got our meeting with Evan Lowe moved up an hour, so it's actually worked perfectly.
You can adjourn the meeting as the chair has to adjourn the meeting.
So, at this point, let's go back to the public. I have a card from Tara Martin Milius who would like to speak.
Thank you. I didn't wave fast enough earlier. I did want to say thank you very much as a member of the public and a receiver of your services. I appreciate it very much, particularly on today when you open up the conversation to what might happen in the future and how we are remaining aligned with our ultimate purposes, which is reduction of greenhouse gas, climate change, intervention, and also so you don't get back into a situation where I think kind of PCUP or CPC is in right now, PG&E, right? Where they've legislated themselves into a kind of corner where they are no longer, they're solidified in silos where they can't get out of certain kinds of things, and they're not serving their public as well. And so the issue of the thing that I think matters tremendously here is that we have local control, and that you have both microscopic with the legislation and telescopic view, where you're looking both at the current protection for need and what the potential issues are for the future, and how you can continue to make sure that you're not getting painted into that weird corner where you're making decisions against something that you really want for survival. So thank you for bringing up the issue. Thank you for addressing it, and thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thanks for being here.
Any other members of the public which wish to address us?
No, thank you.
All right, I'll close public comment.
Hillary, thank you again so much. This was, it's hard in the same week asking to come together twice. A 4-hour chunk is a huge chunk of it. You did an outstanding job. This is definitely good stuff in your business. Thank you. Thank you, Sean, for keeping us educated.
And we're adjourned.
Thank you guys. I'm glad it's helpful. 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 I'm glad it's helpful.